be using my phone to keep track of time, just for your interest. The public hearing is organized according to Section 890 of the Local Government Act. Tonight's public hearing involves the zoning amendment bylaw number 3351/2014 and the quality of life official community bond amendment bylaw number 3350/2014. The purpose of the two proposed amendments is to assign land use regulations to the lands accredited by the Prince Rupert Border Extension process. There will be presentations from the city manager, city planner, Dr. Barb Thageter, and the proponent. After which, every person present who believes that their interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important to restrict your remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaw in a respectful manner. Written submissions are available to the public. If a person wishes to make a presentation at the public hearing, they are welcome to do so, provided that the following criteria are followed. This is necessary in order to allow for the recording of the public hearing process. The chairperson will recognize only those individuals who present themselves on the speaker list or identify themselves once we have made it through the list. Prior to speaking, please provide your full name and be prepared to spell your surname for the corporate administrator. Please also provide your residential or business address. Should you wish to read from a prepared statement, the city would appreciate receiving a copy for reference purposes by the corporate administrator. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation. Please note that this is not a question period at which a debate takes place. City council will not provide any comments on issues raised, but will be in attendance to listen to the comments presented. Should no additional speakers present themselves, the chair will call 3 times for anyone else to speak to the matter. If no one else comes forward, the public hearing will be adjourned. After the public hearing is adjourned, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing. And we'll start with our presentations. First, we have a presentation from City Planner Zeno Cricket.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The intent of this public hearing is to complete Prince Rupert report.
Excuse me, Zeno, sorry to interrupt. I don't think your mic is on.
Is it okay now? Yeah. It can just be closer. So, starting over, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The intent of this public hearing is to complete Prince Rupert border extension by assigning specific land use designation in quality of life official community plan and assigning specific zones in City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw to the newly accreted lands into the City of Prince Rupert boundary jurisdiction. I have some maps that are on the wall, and the same maps will be displayed on the overhead projector. The first map is the original proposal for the Prince Rupert border extension, which was done in late 2012. Map number 2, this map right here, is what was the end result of the cutting out. Which is the result of the approval gained from the province. The next map is the beginning of the analysis of the proposed land use and zoning bylaw amendments. And the first one is official community plan, and it is in your report. It's on page 12, and the amendments to official community plan include both text and mapping exercise. The text is essentially amending the policies for the industrial land and the policies for the open space land to include the newly accreted lands into the land use designations. The next one is the map 4, and the amendment is similar. It includes text amendment, which essentially includes developers and
Mr. Carter, can we try next one?
Thank you. Yes. So on the zoning bylaw, the text essentially develops a new zone, which is entitled Liquefied Natural Gas and Marine Terminal Facility Zone, the acronym of N5. This bylaw, as official community plan bylaw, was introduced to the council in early summer, and it has gone through a number of amendments. The most recent one was November 3, and that was to include.
Apologies for the technical difficulties.
That is to include bullet, which is included in section 75.3, the last bullet, which reads handling and processing of all oil products, including crude or bitumen, are prohibited. Again, the schedule is.
Can't hear you. Can't hear.
Can we fix the mic, please?
Just continue on. Hopefully it's going to work. I'm not going to be very long.
Zana, could you maybe speak closer to the mic?
Sure.
Thank you.
And the mapping amendment essentially is included in Schedule A, and it translates into an amendment to our zoning map, which is shown on your projector. With respect to referrals, public notifications, and comments from the community, staff has reviewed Local Government Act Section 879 with respect to consultation requirements, and concluded that sufficient consultation opportunities have been extended to the surrounding jurisdictions and appropriate provincial authorities during the Prince Rupert boundary expansion process. The notices to the community and public were issued in two issues of the local newspapers. We have chosen to be quite large, a bit larger than on the average, to assure that it's clearly visible and advertised for tonight. Staff has also attended 3 public information meetings on July 24th, September 4th, and November 25th, and presented this information alongside the proposed project. As of the date of this report, I did not have any inquiries. However, since then, I have received one over-the-counter inquiry, which was confirmation that the earlier mentioned line about prohibiting oil and bitumen was included. I received one email inquiry from Regional District, from Queen Charlotte Regional District, which dealt primarily with the Prince Rupert border expansion process rather than the amendments to the zoning bylaw. And we have received 2 written communications, which you have in your agenda, and which is also available at the entrance. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Next is the proponent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is John Carter. I'm the project manager for WCC LNG Project Company. And I was invited here this evening to provide some information on the proposed LNG project at Tuck Inlet, which is the subject of the zoning hearing tonight. Sorry, I'm blocking my screen. Before I begin, let me first acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Coast Chinchin, and thank the city and the council for providing me this opportunity to share some information with you here tonight. So a bit about the project. We commenced looking at this opportunity back in 2011 with an extensive site selection process. We identified Tuck Inlet as a potentially viable site in 2013 and began engagement with the city, the Port Authority, and the First Nations, Blaxpalong and the We worked with the city to gain access to the lot, and that was an agreement that was reached in June of 2014. And at that point, we commenced a public engagement process. We've held 3 public meetings in the last 5 months. The first day in practice was July 24th, September 4th, and most recently on November 25th, to give the community some early insight into what projects we may be proposing for the site. We're still in the pre-filing stage of the environmental assessment process. We've not filed a project description yet, so we wanted to get early input from the community on their key areas of concern. We have received an export permit from the National Energy Board in March of this year to export up to 30 million tons of LNG per year. And we are preparing to enter the formal environmental assessment process with the submission of a project description probably late December or early January. We're in discussion with the regulators now on timing, so we're close to doing that. As you'll see in the next 2 charts, we are still evaluating some development options for the site while we've been conducting geotechnical studies, environmental baseline studies, and gathering data. This is a very large project, and projects of this scale in this location and the current LNG price environment are very challenging for any proponent. So we're going to take our time and be very deliberate in our concept selection, and we'll continue to engage with stakeholders and advise as the project design basis evolves. This first slide here shows the onshore concept. On the left is a map. Oops, sorry. On the left is a map of the lot 444 and the proposed project. And the proposed onshore project location. You can see it would be in the southern portion, the flatter. If you've seen the site, it's not very flat, but the flatter portion of the lot. And the proposal would be for 5 process trains of LNG of approximately 6 million tons capacity each per year. We would start with an initial development of potentially 2 trains, and then build up to 30 MTA, million tons per annum. But we would do the environmental assessment over the potential full build out to look at the impacts of the full potential. It would have up to 3 marine berths at full build out, and you can see the city's watershed boundary does come into the far eastern portion of the lot. And if you've read the bylaw, the zoning bylaw description, a setback of 50 meters has been provided from the water conservation area to ensure the watershed is protected. The actual drinking water source is the Woodworth Lake, which is about 4 kilometers to the east and off this map. And for the onshore concept, water management and drainage control is a key focus for both the facility design and construction phase of the project. On the right, we have an artist's 3D visualization of what the onshore concept may look like. And this is the result of the current concept study work we've been undertaking. And there's, if if you have time, in the back of the room, there are some larger versions of these. I know it's pretty small for people in the back. For the barge mounted concept that we've been considering, it's a similar location map is shown. You can see where the lot is just north of the city's furthest developed boundary. This concept would have up to 5 barges, each barge producing approximately 6 million tons per year as well. Access to the barges would be via access ways for personnel to be able to get on and off the barges without using helicopters, and would be either via a causeway or a road if that's feasible to provide access onto the barge. There would be some onshore support facilities like camps and warehouses, and the exact scope would be determined in the next phase should we select the barge concept. So there would still be some onshore scope in this area. So we're hoping to converge on a concept early in 2015. We're going to submit our project description with both concepts so we can enter the formal assessment process. But we hope to pick one early in 2015, and we'll only submit the formal environmental assessment application with a single concept. So this slide just talks a little bit about what we've done to date and what is still left to do in terms of the environmental assessment process. We have undertaken some early environmental baseline surveys, such as marine mammal surveys. We've done cultural heritage resources on the site. We've done fairly large-scale geotechnical investigation of the onshore, and we've seen the barge rig out there. We're doing some marine borings currently. We've also done a navigation simulation exercise. We brought this work forward due to the feedback we got around marine safety in our public sessions. And we've involved the Port Authority and the Pacific Islandage Association. We've gone through all the scenario modeling a carrier transit from Inner Harbor and Utah Inlet. And we're very confident this can be done very safely. It's a very good navigation route for large ships, which is probably why the big port influencers. We've also, as I mentioned, we've had several public meetings, in addition to the 3 public meetings, lots of engagement with First Nation and regional district and cities. What's next? We will be entering the environmental assessment process. There's a tremendous work effort ahead of us. And while this zoning is an important milestone for ourselves and the city, we've got a lot of work to do. This is just the start for us. So we will have to do more baseline studies through next year. We'll do more in-depth geotechnical studies once we determine the actual facility design. And we will be opening a community office here in the first quarter of 2015 to be more accessible for the community. And we'll continue, obviously, with the engagement of the community. So we're really looking forward to continued open engagement with the community. Throughout the environmental assessment process, we'll focus on areas raised by the community and working groups, including air quality, watershed protection, and marine safety, to name a few. So we look forward to continued open dialogue moving forward on the LNG opportunity with the First Nations, with the city, with the community, and I think the group.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a presentation from Dr. Barb Fager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, but I was brought into this project on the request of the mayor and the council in order to look at a couple of specific information items regarding this project that were being a lot of questions were being asked. And those are specifically airshed and watershed issues. So there's a very defined scope of the work that I did, and I just mention this because some people will ask, well, why didn't I cover a million other things? And that's because I was asked only to cover two things. So I looked specifically at airshed and watershed. They were considered to be the most important issues at hand. I do not address a number of other issues that people might consider to be important, and that just is the nature of this report. The report's quite long, and it covers a lot of detail, and I hope that a few people who are particularly interested in what this is all about actually took the time to read it. What I'm going to do today is just go through mostly my summaries and conclusions, and I'm going to break them down into three sections that I think are sort of groupings of them. I'm going to mention a bit about the data quality that I was working with. This was a desktop study. I didn't go out to the site, so there's no new data other than what was available when I started. And I'm also going to talk about potential impacts, and then finally I'm going to come up with some what I call quality of life things that we as Prince Rupertites should think about as we progress with projects like this. The data quality was fairly limited. There's not a lot of data out there about some of the issues that I was asked to look at. So to make accurate predictions of severity and frequency of environmental impacts we might expect from a particular project like this, a lot of the information wasn't available yet. Particularly things like baseline air quality monitoring for Prince Rupert. They have very limited baseline right now. Dispersion modeling, which is what we do when people want to see how air pollutants travel through the atmosphere in the region. That hasn't been done yet. Water chemistry on the nearby lakes has not yet been done. Modeling to determine whether there will be an acid deposition plume coming from the site and where it will travel and how it will travel with the wind hasn't been done yet. Critical load modeling, which is how you determine whether you're getting too much of a pollutant coming into a water supply, that hasn't been done yet either. This is not surprising, so I point these out simply to say that these are things that have not yet been done and need to be done before we can make accurate estimates of how things are. And that's okay because when there's an environmental assessment, those things will be done. So they're definitely part of the environmental assessment. But just take it into account that the predictions that I'm going to come up with here are just based on really limited data. So I put this up because I just wanted to quickly point out the two lakes that most people are concerned about. This is Shawatlands Lake right here, and this is Woodworth Lake right here. Shawatlands Lake is Prince Rupert's emergency water supply. It is not used regularly for water, but on rare occasions, if there's a breakdown in the system, it might be used. This one here is our raw water source. Also important is that right along the edge here of the lake is the watershed divider for that system, so that water flows mostly from here into the ocean, in the Tuck Inlet, and the facility is located on this side. Over here is another steep cliff that separates the Shawatlands from Woodworth, and that's sort of the topography of the situation. So based on that, I made some potential impact estimates. The estimates were based on a review of studies that were done in the region. In particular, I looked at some of the studies that were done in Kitimat for LNG plants that were there in Kitimat, and also for Pacific Northwest LNG here because they've recently done some of their studies for this region. However, recognize that it wasn't done for this particular location under the particular circumstances that we're going to expect to occur, i.e. meteorological stuff, wind patterns and whatnot. So these estimates will need to be confirmed with additional data and modeling. So just take them for what they are. They're a basic guesstimate of what things will look like. However, what we can say is a few things. We can say that without any question, because it's really hard not to have this happen, there will be some impact when we get 1, 2, 3, or 4 LNGs in our airship. So this is not without impact. However, when you consider WCC LNG by itself, then what we figure is that without looking at cumulative effects, and I'll talk about that in a second, WCC LNG looks like it should be able to meet BC's air quality regulations as they propose their project right now. This is a good thing. However, I will point out that they will, and so will all the other facilities that come in here, have to do cumulative impacts to determine how they're going to interact with each other and how much total pollution is going to be generated. Okay, the deposition plume from WCC LNG could result in acid deposition in Chehawattles Lake. That's a possibility. We won't know for sure yet until we do the airshed modeling, dispersion modeling, and we won't know for sure until we see what the chemistry is on Chehawattles Lake. We don't know that yet. Woodward Lake is the raw water supply. It is separated quite clearly from lot 444 by a very steep ridge. That ridge provides protection for that watershed, which is good. There are a few rare occasions when a westward blowing wind might carry pollutants into Woodward Lake, but it is not going to be a common occurrence, so it's not going to happen all the time. It may not happen at all, just depending on how the design is set up. Okay, based on the studies in Kitimat, it doesn't look like acid deposition from LNGs is likely to cause a lot of vegetation or soil impact. So we're not likely to see burnt out vegetation or acidic soil. So that's also not going to be an issue we probably will have to worry about. Stormwater runoff, there's going to be probably very tight control mechanisms on how the stormwater comes off of the site. But even if there weren't, the way the watershed flows, it would go out to the ocean and not into Chehawattles Lake. So Chehawattles Lake is protected by the topography of the land from being impacted by water coming off the site. Ocean acidification is potentially an issue. This one I've had a lot of people ask me about. Studies have shown that acid deposition from various industries can impact shore zones and cause lowering of the pH of the ocean. Coupled with what's currently happening in our oceans, where we're seeing a drop of pH right now, this could be a problem. We won't know. This is something that's going to need some further study probably along the way. That's just one of those questions that's just starting to come up in the research. It's something we need to look at. From what I've been able to look at, WCC LNG's footprint does not directly impact any sensitive areas on the shoreline. It's a very steep shoreline. There's no eelgrass, there's no kelp beds. There's nothing along that shoreline that's considered sensitive habitat. There are a couple of sites to the north and a little bit to the south where there's some shoreline complexity that they're not impacting and which should continue to be preserved with the footprint of the project as it is. All that being said, it looks like the project is by itself likely to be relatively low impact. But I do recommend that the community consider a number of quality of life things that we can do as a community to encourage both WCC LNG and any other potential proponent that might use that site to actually make our quality of life better. So one of the things that I highly recommend is that the community and all the user groups in the area become involved in what's called an air quality management plan. What an air quality management plan does is it looks at all of the potential polluters in the region and decides how we are going to manage the total amount of pollution. What this also does is it allows you to deal with one-off situations where you get an inversion or a bad wind scenario and you've got pollution coming into the community. What do you do? This plan would actually provide you with the methods of dealing with those problems. Specific to WCC LNG, they have two concepts on the ground. I recommend that you advocate for the one that turns out to have the lowest airshed impact. Right now, that looks like the land-based concept. We'll see if they come up, if you guys come up with any of it. I also recommend that we advocate for the use of best technology available in any project. We can't do bad by ourselves, or can't do bad to ourselves if we ask for the best technology when people are doing this. Also, to advocate for the inclusion of renewable energy resources. Renewable energy does several things. Firstly, right now, the way these things are set up, all of the current LNG proposals that are on the ground in Prince Rupert, including WCC LNG, are proposing to burn natural gas in order to compress the LNG. Now, you can actually have these facilities use energy. They can use energy from BC Hydro Grid, or they can use energy from a renewable resource. In using that energy, they will reduce the amount of natural gas they burn through compression. That will reduce the amount of emissions, things like NOx, which is nitrogen oxides, and SO2, sulfur oxide. Those emissions can be reduced if you use renewable energy. The community has water line issues, as we all know. One of the things that's slated is a replacement of the water line between here and Woodworth Lake. That is called the Raw Water Supply Line Replacement Project, and I recommend that that is done before any industrial development of DL 444. That will make sure that we don't have to use Shawatma Lake as an emergency water supply. Also, I recommend that the water chemistry of both lakes, Shawatman and Woodworth, be monitored both during the construction phase and also during the operation phases, just to make sure that nothing gets out of whack. And if it does, we can react to it immediately. And even though this design does not currently have any shoreline infilling, I highly recommend that we continue to advocate for projects and designs that do not have shoreline hardening straightening or infilling, as these things are really hard on our habitat, particularly our salmon population. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a presentation from our city manager, Bob Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I've done here, and I know that both council and members of the public have access to my report, so I'm not going to go in detail over the report. I think it's fair to say all the recommendations that Dr. Fagner has in her presentation are actually embedded in my report to council, and recommending that the recommendation is to proceed with this bylaw with the following determinations in the resolution, or the recommended resolution of council. And they cover off, and I'm not going to go over them all again, but they cover off all the issues that Dr. Fager just indicated. But there's a couple of others that I think are worth noting. So what I did is a report on the economic, social, and environmental issues with respect to this particular rezoning, and the difference, or the different issues that came up from social was the issue of managing noise and light from an industrial development. And what we're recommending in here that those issues be monitored and dealt with through the environmental assessment process to minimize the amount of light, call it light pollution, and noise as a nuisance. On the economic side, I think everyone is likely aware that through commercial arrangements between Imperial and ExxonMobil and the city of Prince Rupert, there's been access to work on that project, and it is all subject to rezoning, by the way. I don't think that was made so clear by my friend, but the zoning has to go forward for this project to move forward. The zoning has to go forward, the project can't go forward. And the commercial arrangements basically are the city will get $18 million guaranteed for the first 2 years of their investigative access to the property, and then subsequently, depending on how long they take before they make some determinations, we'll get those kinds of dollars in each year after 3 to 5 year agreement. So those become the direct economic benefits. In addition to that, there is a substantial other economic benefits with respect to general indirect economics, the development of the whole production, construction workers, etc. And more probably interesting to us as the city of Prince Rupert, they're also within our boundaries and will be subject to municipal taxation. I made some assumptions in my report. It's the best information I could find at the time, and you will recognize that as reported in the paper, that if we assume the assessed values of this particular proposal is $1.5 billion, we use today's industrial mill rate and the kind of number that the city would be able to have as a tax revenue would be up to $66 million per annum. So I think that those are the highlights of what my report says, and ultimately we're here tonight to listen to the public, so I'm going to keep quiet and let the public have their say. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 3 people on the speakers list. We will go through these 3 people first, and then afterwards, if anybody feels compelled to come up to the mic, you are absolutely welcome to do so. A few more now. So we'll start with our first speaker. Actually, I'll have, well, since this mic's not working, I think we'll just go one at a time to this mic over here. We'll start with Peter Brown. And just please state your name and your last name for the corporate administrator and your address, please.
My name is Peter Brown, B-R-O-W-N. I'm a longtime resident of Prince Rupert.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please put your address?
Oh, 60 Hazelnut.
60 Hazelnut?
Yep.
Thank you.
I've jotted down some notes, but I'll make this as short as possible. First, I'd like to congratulate the mayor and the council on their endeavors coming up and the past election. It was called by City Council to approve bylaw changes that will provide the city with money that will help in its endeavors to supply the city of Prince Rupert, hopefully with meaningful expenditures. I can see personally why this is being done, and I would like to express this is not a dissenting opinion, but an opinion of careful oversight. The city, in changing these bylaws on property that was awarded by the province, must accept any future ramification as the term comes down the pipe. This vote will, in sense, tie itself to other hard decisions that will have to be made at later dates. I do believe that some decisions are already made. I've read the report as much as I can, and if I have any errors, I'd like somebody to correct them. The main aspect that I'm concerned is the proximity of the plant to the water system that feeds Prince Rupert, fresh water, and surrounds it, salt water. In the air quality dispersion model, according to the report, the fact is that Woodward Lake is only 4 kilometers west of the proposed plant. And according to the report, by its own admission, a westerly wind blows only 10% of the time. This wind, also in the report, stated that this could cause a deposition plume over the lake. That would equal 36 days of the year. These days are often confined to those nice sunny days where the westerly wind blows. These west winds often take place during the summer and are often clumped together, not a sporadic one here, one there. These westerly winds are often accompanied by fog that can take place for a whole day or the major part of the day, weeks at a time. The question is, will the fog trap the CO, I'll call it COX, and will this increase the amount of emissions at ground level, thus speeding up the buildup of emissions in the lake? The air quality management plan, in my opinion, should be a company-city relationship with a private overseer, and restrictions should be well laid out ahead of time. No shoulder shrugging should be allowed if some undesirable aspects happen, much like dust from the pellet plant. The use of gas turbine, there should be no question in regards to the land-based proposal. If it is that much cleaner and less invasive to the surrounding areas, this should have just been the natural selection. Detailed water chemistry of Schwatman's Lake and Woodworth Lakes should be done before, during, and after construction. And an example of the city of Nanaimo tests the water up to 2,000 times a year in desired areas. Who will be responsible if any damage is done to the water system during the construction phase or the plant running stage? The care for Schwatman's Lake, example, liming and restocking if needed. Please note that this lake is the historic sockeye estuary. During the question and answer last week, Schwatman's situation, in my opinion, was almost treated like a backyard slough. The public would like to know where the water for the LNG project and the camp is going to come from. Is it going to be Woodward's or Schwatman's? And just as a matter of interest, I'd like to know if any First Nations artifacts were found on these sites. Acid disposition is a very important subject that cannot be ignored. It can destroy ecosystems and affect the health of everyone that falls into the footprint. As the report states, there is no lower threshold in which health effects are not harmful. As for the harbor, I'm down there every day. I work exactly where this plant is going to go. And I have many questions concerning the future. Are the anchorages within the harbor designated for only LNG? These ships are 2 times longer than any log freighter and will need a large turnaround area, which was brought up on the LNG onshore concept that Donna just put up. According to that map, it was very close to both sides of the Tuck Inlet. Will current shiploading of logs and other materials be hampered if anchorages 1, 2, and 3 are discontinued? Will the current longshoring jobs be lost if the harbor loses its log shiploading? Will the no-go zone stop all access to the north end of Prince Rupert Harbor? Thank you for letting me speak tonight, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors. As the saying goes, nothing ventured, nothing.
Thank you very much. Next, Carol Brown. Sorry, Carol, could you put the mic down?
BROWN, and my mailing address is block 1066 Prince Rupert, BC. I live in Dodge Cove, and I also have an apartment in town. Lot 48 Dodge Cove. How much time do you have to
Speak really.
I want to first state that I am unequivocally opposed to LNG fossil fuel development. There are too many issues to address here. Ones that I believe the federal and provincial governments should be addressing. But I will begin with some issues closest to home, and if you allow me, expand to others that affect us, and even though they are more removed from us, but we're only part of a whole.
Just before you continue, just would like you to try to keep it within the not before zoning. I understand LNG has many cumulative effects, and many issues along the line, those type of things. But if we can try to keep it within this particular project, that would be appreciated as well.
Everything relates to this project.
Just would like to mention that before you begin.
I have great concerns about LNG tankers coming into the inner harbor. Anyone that navigates on the water in all kinds of weather and also knows the history of ships going aground in our harbor knows that these 300-meter plus vessels in such close confines, 2-kilometer wide channel between the entrance to dodge cold and fairway breakwater, will demand a large no public access zone and a very big interruption in mariners' travel in the harbor. Now, I was looking the other day as I went across, and I was realizing that when I saw it 2 kilometers across, it was on a radar screen. So as I was looking, I was also realizing that the port has since been built, and then a ship was sitting there getting cargo, and then there was dolphin pilings on the other side are also out from the land. So I'm guessing it's even less than 2 kilometers. Safe transportation should be the priority for all the passengers on the 5 or more ferries that traverse these waters and the seaplanes that enter and exit Seacole. Skipping to the airshed and reading the report to Council dated November 25th on page 1, 3.2, what are the impacts of the pollutants of LNG on human health? Should convince anyone that their choice should be clean air as opposed to introducing cancer-causing agents into our air. If you haven't read this, I encourage you to do so, and at the same time, think of the potential effects on the sick, the elderly, and children and unborn generations. All of the reasons to side with the environment in this discussion are supported by the evidence that the total footprint of LNG projects are not clean. I argue that with so many companies involved in one project, you cannot omit the extraction of the product you are shipping. So, in the Vancouver Observer, a fellow called Barry Sykes-Fresh did a chart of all the projects. So, WCC LNG project is the largest of all projects. And you can see that on page 11. It talks about its size. Now, he said that the overall footprint, we're not talking just the footprint here, the overall footprint, is 118 million tons of CO2 annually in BC. If you look at the chart in this report, CO2 metric tons per day were 24,723. That is a lot. And that is separate from the other emissions such as SO2 and NOx. So when you put them all together, that's an awful lot of tons of greenhouse gases going into our atmosphere in this locale. To find out why these emissions are so high, you would have to travel up the imaginary pipeline to our neighbors in northeast BC, where there exists the dirty practice of fracking or fracturing our earth to capture the gas. Well, the government of Canada has turned its back on the health of First Nations people who live in the area of the tar sands, people who live with rare cancers and multiple deaths due to cancers in their families. We are only recently talking about the emissions and leaks in gas fields. New reports are unreported by the government or mainstream media. Now, I could state an example from David Hughes, who headed unconventional gas research during his 32 years with the Geological Survey of Canada. And he has analyzed the implications of 7 large LNG export licenses issued by the National Energy Board. He calls it reckless approval of 14.6 billion cubic feet per day of gas and blames BC Liberals' government LNG policy but also the National Energy Board has violated its own mandate to ensure energy security as it far exceeds the most optimistic projections for BC gas. The first 11 LNG projects approved or under review equals double the energy equivalent of the tar sands. Meeting the NEB approvals would require drilling near 50,000 new wells in the next 27 years. Unfortunately, I don't have the figures on this project and how many new wells it would take. The National Energy Board has not turned away one request for export permits. Why are the governments applying pressure on everyone to make quick decisions? And also I would like to refer to the debate at the library where everyone, just about almost everyone on the board that was speaking talked about why are we doing this with such speed. We need to take the time and we need to have the basis of basic science, and that was mentioned here tonight by Barb, that there was a lot of science that hasn't been done yet. Now, they could be rushing to, because of a falling market for gas, but by reading a variety of reports and emails obtained by the Freedom of Information Act, the Liberal government is concerned about that the truths will overcome their boastful projections, which seem to be the platform they are precariously perched on. With the government so intertwined with these corporations, whose greed is it anyway? The National Energy Board and the BC government are losing their credibility with the public. The environmental assessment process, whether federal or provincial, is a thin veneer of protection for our environment. If the First Nations do not want a pipeline across their land, and many don't, then what will be the role of the City of Prince Rupert in leveraging and dividing these people if they go ahead with this LNG project? If there continues to be open chemical ponds from which animals drink and contaminated drinking water for the people living in Treaty 8, then what will the governing body of Prince Rupert be able to do in the future? Have you thought of the fact that once this land is zoned heavy industry, that the LNG proponent will be pressuring First Nations in the interior and in Treaty 8, implying that they have to comply, or they will be the undoing of Prince Rupert and its citizens? This is a sure route to divide people of the North. I questioned the statement that the zoning process, if approved, does not give Imperial Exxon the right to proceed to build an LNG terminal. This claim is the elephant in the room. The next statement is that approval comes through the provincial government's environmental assessment process and the issuing of all the appropriate permits. Essentially, this is true, but read between the lines. The BC government has just approved 2 pipelines and the most disliked LNG project that sits on Lena Island in the Skeena estuary with salmon smolts, where salmon smolts depend on their survival. If any projects are to be turned away by the EA, it could have been this one. Do the councillors really believe that the BC government and the environmental assessment process will turn away the application by Imperial Oil and ExxonMobil? I have heard some scientists say there is poor science in the Pacific Northwest environmental application, and it was approved. I ask of everyone here, are you prepared to turn your back on the people and animals in northern BC, which will suffer the most from contaminated water, leaks and emissions which already exist, as Canada has already done to the people of Fort Mackay and Fort Chipewyan? Are you going to be the ones responsible if there is an accident like the one in Washington State, where a processing vessel exploded? Flying debris pierced double walls of 14.6 million gallon storage tank. Nearly 1,000 residents and employees were evacuated. Where will the people living in the villages evacuate to? And I could probably have talked more about how these emissions and the lighting and the noise will affect me. I already, while living in Dodge Cove, it's never night there anymore because of the lighting from the port. So we never have darkness. So the lighting will definitely affect, I would say, Prince Rupert too. I want everyone to consider that this is an ethical and moral decision, not a decision based on money. Wait till we have the science and the solutions to pollution rather than make another global problem like the one in the tar sands. And again, this Barry Sachs Fresh has charts, and he suggests that it will become a carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas tsunami if all of the proposals were to go through, and he has charts to show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I'll call up Lothar. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, Lothar.
My name is Shiza, Lothar Shiza,
Can you spell that for the corporate administrator, please?
Shiese.
And your address?
302 Fifth Avenue West.
Thank you.
There are so many things that I could talk to here, and there's so little time. The previous lady here, she was able to point out it. Is there more volume available this mic? Because historically, this place with the sound system sucks. And currently it does too. Because,
Just one moment, Lothar is, can everybody hear Lothar again?
Yeah. Okay, it's because I'm aware that I have to go close to the mic. It's like council meeting too. People go like this, and then they go here, and then they go like this again. You gotta stick to the mic, close to it, be aware. Let's go back in history when we had the pulp mill. When you watch the effluent that used to come out of the pulp mill, some days it would go into Morrison Basin and circle right around into the watershed that we get our drinking water from. I'm privy to the fact, since I've been here since 1980, that a huge amount of the people that used to work for the city have died from stomach cancers. It can be directly related to the effluent in the air from the pulp mill. When you look at our water, when it comes out of the tap, actually you should smell it. It's very, like, as soon as you open the water tap, we have a lot of chlorine in our water. Personally, I'm impacted quite dramatically with, I have problems going to the swimming pool. And when you look at the geology around here, my background is mining and geology, we have a lot of pyrites in the rocks. And the pyrites are associated, are situated in fractures, small fractures. And wherever we do excavation, you can see it. You have actually pyrites and chalcopyrites, which is copper and pyrite, iron pyrite. If you look at Hayes Creek, just where the bridges, you go the highway,
Lothar, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'd like if you could bring it into lot before.
Well, I'm trying to give a history here first,
I understand.
and this is a problem.
Yes, but I
Let's
just
try to
want you
explain things.
Absolutely. But if you
Okay,
could
but
bring it
I'm
in-
trying to give you understanding of the water.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted.
And you look at Hayes Creek, we have a lot of algae in the water, in the creek. Everything's stained red. That's the iron. Okay. We're concerned about what comes off the proposed development here with LNG and how that will affect the water, sulfur and nitrogen. Well, we already exist in the natural geology, okay, is the acidics, okay? So we're going to be adding on to it, and the lady previous to the last one was mentioning where our water comes from, there's natural protections. There is no natural protection, because when you look at the surrounding hillsides, okay, it's higher up than the water. Well, anything in the air has to go over that, okay? You get up in the morning, there's dew on everything, right? Well, that comes from the air, and it's on the plant material. Okay, eventually that goes into the hill and drains down into the water. Where we get our water from. So there is no protection. It's a fallacy, I think. Has anybody been to a site, like I noticed, I know the mayor from Port Ed traveled to, I think it was Malaysia, was able to be on hand to a place. You have compressors that produce the liquefied natural gas, okay? Well, I'm just wondering, when we had the pulp mill, whenever the planer, the chipper started up, a huge racket. Well, isn't the compressor on the same level? Like we having, what, 4 trains, each one would probably have a compressor? Well, that's a lot of noise, wouldn't it be? I'm getting very nervous. I'm losing my train of thought here, but there's so much more that I could talk to, but I'm starting to lose it here. But I'm really, really concerned, right? Like was mentioned before, that I think we're going way, way, way too fast on this thing. What comes to mind to me is, are you proposing that this 444 property is to be sold to an LNG interest? Or is it to be leased so that we retain control of the land? About a month and a half ago on a Friday paper, there was a person in Terrace who ran for council in 2011, didn't succeed. His last name is Guy, G-E-E, what I remember. And he basically expressed deep concern and regret that the Council of Terrace sold 1,000 acres of land, prime land, by the airport to a Chinese interest. And it was stated in the same article, the proceeds from that property would be going into embellishing the property, another access or whatever, to make it more viable for the Chinese interests. And I just shake my head, like, should that money, if they had sold this thing, that money should go into the community, into infrastructure and helping, the local terrace area instead of just the property that they sold. So, to give away, in other words, selling this property to a foreign interest,
I don't see that as a viable option. We should have at least, if we're going to go through with this, so that we can have, if there's any concerns of, we can stop the whole process and we have some leverage, not just that we have to resort to BC government or the federal government, which is, at this point in the juncture, is ludicrous as far as I'm concerned, because these entities are only interested in perpetuating their position in power. They have no real interests, or we don't have any real interests with them. They're not in our, not looking after us, I don't think so. What else is there?
No, sir. Just to bring it back to the specific project, is there any new information you'd like to add?
Personally, I think it's ludicrous to develop this 444 property as an LNG facility. Period. I think that this whole thing is almost like going back to the Klondike days. Somebody mentioned gold. Well, in this case, somebody's mentioned gas. And it's the same scenario. You know, we're losing sight of things, and we're being pressured, extremely pressured, I think, to go forward with this, because every time we have a prospect of increasing development, in other words, a boom, most of the times this is perpetuated or initiated by somebody who has power in the sense of money. Okay, they're playing with commodities, and this whole thing gets pushed forward, and it's a financial grab and it gets perpetuated, but. At some point, people will be paying for this in one way or another. Whether it's, wait a minute, my thought was here is more focused on this boom and bust thing. Every time we have a boom, we think we're more comfortable because we have more income, we can buy things and so forth like this. But what is happening is we create kids. And what happens after that is we have a bust. Yet we have to somehow pay for the upkeep for those kids. Okay, between schools, water, you know, like infrastructure, right? We have no thought to this sort of thing. We're just looking for how can this make my life better? In other words, in my pocket. What we're not looking at is every time we have a boom, we are making more kids. That causes more expenditure or more requirement to go towards infrastructure. And we currently have a BC government. I spoke to this at a meeting on the our budget, city budget. It was at the Civic Center.
Okay.
Hang on. I'm just trying to keep my. I'm trying to keep my fingers on. We used to have an industry here. An arbitrary government was elected and decided that this should go to private. Okay. I made a mention at that meeting that in excess of $500 million of assets were liquidated from this area, the Northwest, okay? It eventually got sold for like $6-7 million. And the city is still reeling from that because we've lost valuable tax revenue to keep our infrastructure up to par. And over the years, every time we have to sit down and do a budget, we don't have enough to meet the requirements. We have to prolong infrastructure. And as a result, things have deteriorated. And analogy I used was like every year we have a paper cut when we have to do a budget. My trouble is those paper cuts are never healing because previous mayor and councils had the attitude that if we speak out or we even go against the BC government about what they did here, like in a form of legal action, hang on, this is...
I just want you to be able to bring it back to the LNG.
I'm sorry,
because I know that you have a lot of thoughts.
I'm
about
sorry,
a lot
but
of
you're
things.
interrupting me, and I'm trying to get a point across. And right at
I'll let you continue, but I just want
the
to bring it back.
juncture of what I'm trying to get across to you, you're interrupting me.
Absolutely.
So I'm really...
Yep, absolutely, continue.
Okay. Okay, now the mic's cut up.
This is the mic.
Right?
Continue.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get across to you is that we are situated with an infrastructure problem that we are hoping, or we're being swayed, that this new development will help us in the future. But I think that this is a bad thing, except that I can see one LNG facility being built and operating, but not to the extent that we are looking at here right now. How many actually were we looking at in this area? 6, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6? What? How many?
There's 7.
7.
But just want to say about that, we're speaking about one particular zoning
Yeah, I know.
here. I just need to bring it back to
I know,
that.
but this
And if there's anything particular about this particular project that you
Yeah.
want to mention about,
Yeah.
if not, then in the interest of time and other people who would like to speak,
Yeah.
I'd like to give up the mic to them.
Yeah,
So
I
if there's
understand.
anything else you'd like to say, though, you
I
absolutely
think
welcome to.
I think at this juncture, I've had enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. Next, we have Barbara Poole.
Members of the audience, maybe I'm not
Yeah,
on here
sorry, you
yet.
have to be close.
My name is Barbara Poole, I'm Malaysia. I live at 1085 Ambrose Avenue, Prince Rupert. Proper congratulations to the new city council on the wish of success in conducting the business this evening. I thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation this evening, and in so doing, I'm representing only myself. I paid mortgages on 2 homes in Prince Rupert, and together with my intention to live here the rest of my life, I do deem that my interest is affected by the proposed bylaws. I wish to acknowledge that we are on the Simstan territory. This is not a mere formality. As a relative newcomer to this land, I have a deep and abiding gratitude and appreciation for the countless generations of First peoples in this area. They lived harmoniously with the land, and through their stewardship, they have preserved it to this day so that we can continue to be able to enjoy a very rich natural abundance that is often called pristine because of its great beauty that's largely unspoiled by the industrialization that's so evident in much of the world. We newcomers have much to learn by giving serious and thoughtful consideration to how that was achieved. Respect is a concept that is central to, as a core value of First Nations culture here, and we heard that word respect several times in the meeting earlier this week. Respect for each other, and this also applies to respect for the natural world in which we live. And this leads to the first of the 3 points that I'd like to make. The first point is that we do have a lot to lose if this goes wrong. I don't have to enumerate the many natural beauties that surround us in this area, the sea and the air and the land. All of us who choose to live here acknowledge this. We have also have a community that's very rich in cultural diversity, people of many cultures, people of amazing talents in the arts, and rich history and traditions in this area. These are not necessarily going to be the qualities that come up in an environmental assessment, but they are really important to the people who live here. And I've often reflected on the fact, why is it that we have a wonderful complement of doctors in our community, our physicians on whom we rely. It's a very, very important asset. And Fort St. John, I'm sorry to say, is we're always hearing in the news how they're struggling. And I just think, why would a doctor choose to take his family to that community when, if they could come to Prince Rupert instead, enjoy our views. The second point is that we are in a certain economic environment that is changing. It has changed a great deal since World War II. After World War II, there was a lot wider distribution of wealth. I'm certainly not an economist, but I have informed myself enough to know that there's trends and changes in wealth distribution in the world, to know that there's been a tremendous change, and that's ongoing. With unfathomable amounts are going to a very wealthy few, and they're going to fewer and fewer people, and it's being concentrated there, whereas others are getting less, and it's, heard about the gutting of the middle class. That wealth commands a lot of attention and power, but might does not make right. The agendas of the oil and gas are not a secret. Their purpose is to make money for their shareholders, and it's just not complicated. We have a proponent, ExxonMobil, that is one of the largest corporations in the world. I believe it's the largest oil and gas company in the world. And their purpose certainly is not to help out towns that have fallen on hard times. Their ethic is not to avoid interfering with the lifestyle of just a measly few thousand people that they've never heard of before. Their annual budget is larger than 100 countries in the world and about the same size as the GDP of Norway. This money and power assumes that they will have the best lawyers and negotiators to be found. We've seen how much liability resource extraction companies are willing to assume when disasters hit, let alone assume for the slow degradation of the planet. These incidents come to mind: Exxon Valdez, the Gulf oil spill, and our own Mount Poly recently. You could also think of the tar sands, and I'm sure everybody in this room has a picture in their mind of what that looks like, and not to mention the fracking that is going on. And we hear Christy Clark saying about touting how natural gas is just the cleanest thing in the world, and we're going to really help China with the clean energy. Yes, it is clean at the point where it's burned, but this is how the government, this is how we are separated from our fellow citizens on the other side of this province who are dealing with the results of fracking. And fortunately, a lot of this is just because Canada has no energy strategy. Just coming back again to think about the powerful company that we are going to be negotiating, dealing with if this goes ahead, brings me to my third point. And that is that information concerning the Prince Rupert Legacy Incorporation and other important details have been hard to come by. And I have been interested in this from the very beginning. I have attended all of the public information sessions, and when I saw about Prince Rupert Legacy, the first thing I did was go to City Hall and I said I would like to know more about this. What is this? I can see in the newspaper it's a wholly owned subsidiary, but what is that? The answer was to refer me to a poster in the hall. That was the answer that I got. Now, fortunately, in the meantime, Anna Ashley has asked for the articles of incorporation to be posted on the city website. So I have read those, but you know what? I haven't found anybody else who's told me that they have read them. And I haven't, I must say, I ask any of the counselors here if you have read them, but I think it's very important to read them. We have invested this power into this legacy corporation, into 3 people, 3 senior members of our staff who are unelected. These are unelected people who, in total, the total experience in this town is less than 5 years. In reading those, it's just really unclear to me how the reporting is going to be, how the oversight is going to be, and I'm very concerned when we hear that there's $18 million here at stake, and how. One of my questions was who are the stakeholders, because that wasn't really clear to me. And Mr. Long advised me that there is one stakeholder, and that, or shareholder, I'm sorry, shareholder, pardon me, and that is the city of Prince Rupert. So it still is not clear to me, how does that work? How is your voice as the one shareholder, how is that made? And these are details that I think are very important, because you are our elected representatives, and we need to know. The whole articles of incorporation, there's like 31 pages, and I don't know, I just read some things that really raised some questions in my mind. So I did make copies, because I would like for each of you to have a hard copy to take home to read and really see if you can get more out of it and get the answers that come to my mind. I have also asked other questions at the open houses, or what, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what term is used, but open houses or education, sharing events, and that I have asked these questions in person, and I have not been satisfied with the answers that I've had. Mr. Oathmother mentioned the question about owning or leasing. I think that is a very important piece to know before we go ahead. Is it going to be sold? And or is it going to be leased? Are these going to be on a barge, or are they going to be on shore? If they're on a barge, I ask a question, then can we actually get any so-called property taxes from this? But the answer I had was no, not necessarily, is the Port Authority. So I do not have the definitive answer on that, but I didn't feel that there was a definitive answer known. That's kind of like one of these things, maybe later. Another thing, just a question, is when did Prince Rupert's ownership begin? Because I thought it was May 2004 when this was signed off by Corley Oaks and Judith Guichon. In Mr. Long's presentation, it says 1939, and other people I've heard say, oh, we've always owned it. So I don't know where the facts lie with that either. I would mention that West Vancouver, Lions Bay, and I have both adopted resolutions to keep LNG tankers out of Howe Sound. Now there's a lot of very bright people down there, and I think maybe we should find out what they know, and what we might have to learn from them. I also say, like, what is the rush here? We've heard it's time sensitive, but really, what is the rush? We're not planning for the Christmas party here. We really need to be looking. We need to acknowledge we're planning for the next 40 years. So I understand you are in a very difficult position, because we are badly in need of money in this town. I understand that. And yet, I just really want to ask you to be very cautious and to take your time with this decision. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you. It was an honor to be able to address you this evening.
Thank you. Next, I'll call Larry Golden.
Larry Golden, 1601 Second Avenue West. Most of the questions I have are been dealt with. I would like some clarification. There was some mention of SO2. As I understood in the previous that went through, we were talking about sweet gas as opposed to sour gas. There's a whole suite of problems that came in. Excuse me, if it's sour gas as opposed to the other question, and I have this, the taxes, etc. And the other thing is coming out is the water that's needed. So where is that water going to come from, and where is it being treated, or is it going to be treated? But my main question, and I've given the councilors a copy of a map. Yeah. So what I thought, and that was the main point I wanted to bring up, that if we're going to, and I think the airshed is the most important, not the most important, is one of the factors we have to think most about. And there, I couldn't tell from the background literature, it looked like they weren't going to do the airshed, was just going to be a several months. And I'm saying at least it has to be at least a year long, just because there's a summer system and a winter system. At least there were in the past. And you have different conditions under it. He was talking about the westerly wind that brought in the fog. I would also, so that we need to monitor, we need to do an airshed study, and I would think if this is passed, and I would say yes, let's pass it, etc. But concurrently, we should do a watershed, airshed management plan, and that should be concurrent with it. What kind of standards we expect these things to be done, etc. Other municipalities have done it. So even when we do it, it's going to have to be done for 12 months, at least. Okay, but there's also, anytime you get into the sciences, people that think we can just average the last 20 years or 30 years or whatever. But even the drawing that I gave you is probably wrong in the sense we've probably had climate change since then. People that remember, we don't get the long periods of fog that set in during the summertime. And so we've probably moved off this system right here to another system already. And so anytime you do the modeling, don't accept the drawing which I gave you there. I suspect it's already passed and we're into another different system. So that's where we're going. So let's do at least 12 months of monitoring, set up numerous stations all over, because it comes down to what is the airshed. And I'm suspecting that the airshed is going to be changing even in the near future. So, and then what I should have said in the very beginning is, if we come up with an airshed quality management plan, it's been done by many municipalities. Let's set it up from the beginning, what our expectations are, etc., and then each one will come in and work on it later. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Arnie Nagy.
With everybody that's spoken, I guess I'll be cut down to only about an hour. Actually, Arnold Nagy, 1235 8th East, homeowner in Prince Rupert, small business owner, lifetime resident. First off, as a member of the Haida Nations, I think it's only appropriate that we recognize the chiefs, the matriarchs, the elders, and the people of the 9 allied tribes here on these territories that we stand today. My first thing I'd like to say, do I support this rezoning? No. Not by any means, and nor will I ever. I think what we have to start recognizing here also, and I've heard it, just to throw out a correction, that that lot was given by the government was actually the regional district that allowed that land to be transferred, according to my understanding. And the reason why I stand here in opposition to this is for the fact of what we have been seeing going on in this area here over the last little while. I am opposed to the liquid natural gas, any of the developments here in the North Coast, period. Not for the fact that I work in the fishing industry, but for the fact that as a First Nations person, we are born to live by one law, and that is the first law, the protection of Mother Nature, who provides us with the wealth and the food that we have gathered for thousands of years. But I'm not going to keep it on that perspective. I think you guys are stuck with a real Donnybrook here as new councils, because you're being pressured by a provincial and a federal government agenda on a gold rush mentality of oil and gas. And they have a lot of power backed by the corporations and the monies that they have to try and force communities such as Prince Rupert that are in economic problems right now to follow their agenda. But I also think that you have the power as council, and with the support of the residents and many other people all up and down, from the interior and all up and down the coast, to make them follow your agenda. You don't have to climb into bed with the provincial and federal governments who are denying us the right to speak at hearings because it takes too long for them to approve it. We have a provincial government that hands out energy certificates like their Christmas cards with no recognition of the First Nations and the Chilcotin decision and what that decision states. There is no respect being shown by any of the companies. They can tell you that they sit down and they negotiate. They negotiate with band councils, but they don't negotiate properly with the way it is supposed to be done in First Nations culture through their hereditary system. And I think many of you on council already know that that debate is taking place here on some of the communities here in the Prince Rupert area and in Lac-Mélan. What we see is a force and no recognition of those rights. We just witnessed it the past few weeks on Burnaby Mountain with Kinder Morgan and how they set up an injunction on unceded territory that they did not have permission to be on, and they go through it. We see those same type of things happening here in the north, which is why the Unistodian camp was set up outside of Houston, to protect those rights to those territories. They do not belong to anybody else until those nations see those territories back. And they have said very clearly no. And as a member of the Haida Nations, I can tell you I support their decision and I say no. I am not against economic development in this part of the area. But we don't have to jump on the gold rush bandwagon and end up costing ourselves instead of gaining anything. Because let's face it, the only reason why the LNG started coming into this province is because of the tax cuts that they demanded from the federal government or the provincial government in order to put their foot in. And Krusty gave them that break that they wanted to try and follow her agenda that she proposed during the last provincial election. That is not fair, that is not openness, and that is not being transparent about what their agenda is. Let's face it, they have the top-notch lawyers. Do you honestly think what you're going to get what is being proposed? I don't. I honestly don't. And I'm not saying that they're liars and thieves, but they're backed by lawyers who know the ins and outs on how to get out of anything that they want. The bottom line for them is profit. And they'll promise you everything. At that meeting at the public library, the word was even thrown on the floor that maybe we'd get a sewage treatment facility. Well, if they can't even get going without tax breaks and government grants and leeways, how the heck are they going to build a sewage treatment plant for the people of Prince Rupert? That's what I mean. Dangle the fish in front of a hungry person, get them to bite, and then you got them on the hook, right? I hope you guys don't bite that hook. There's time. There's lots of time. That gas will be there. But I can also tell you that there are a lot of people, a lot of residents here in Prince Rupert that will stand with me and others as we defend what is right. Somebody's gonna pay for this. And it's those people up the line where the fracking and where that gas is extracted that will pay that price. We see it. We see it documented. And every time you come out and you raise one of the alarms, or the companies screw up on the way that they deal with the people in communities or in the First Nations, what's the first thing they do? They go on TV, just like we're witnessing now with CTV and Kinder Morgan, and saying how they want to work together. They want to work together when they can't get their way because people are standing up in opposition. Then they decide they'll try and play that card. Until then, it's the big bully in the room. You know, and that's what scares me. Yeah, people are desperate here in Prince Rupert, but we have so many other economic opportunities that as a council that we can start looking at. Instead of fish going outside that plant and going to China, let's start looking at a cold storage facility that would keep fish here and allow us to promote and expand on the commercial fishery. Let's start looking at what we can do with those logs that are going on the freighters that are going shipped out of here unprocessed. You know, those are opportunities that built this city, that built the North. And we're turning our back on it, on the hopes and dreams of something there that is based on dirty energy. It's not clean. The fact is, it's dirty. You know, and it scares me because you'll start hearing words about carbon credits and all of this, and we'll buy carbon credits. Well, carbon credits is a joke because all it does is allow people to pollute at the same level that they used to pollute before, and it's nothing for the protection of the environment. I wasn't going to come tonight because I feel like a lot of the people, and it's really unfortunate that this room isn't as full as I thought it was going to be. But if I didn't come here and speak my opposition, I would be as guilty as those that cause the environmental damage to, not just to the earth, but to the people, where that gas is going to be extracted and everywhere in between. You know, I come from a family that was basically fishing industry since time immemorial, from the Haida Nations. In the commercial industry here, we have almost 150 years, and right from the beginning of the commercial fishery, my family's caught fish in these waters. It's not something that I take lightly. You know, I'm not here speaking for the union tonight. I'm here speaking as a citizen, somebody that grew up here. When I grew up, you couldn't drown on the floats because if you fell off one, you hit another one. You landed on the deck of another boat. Now during the salmon season, you can shoot a cannon down the floats and be lucky to hit a boat because of what has been going on here and government policies and stuff. You know, let's not climb into bed with an agenda of greed and making themselves wealthy. Heck, I'd like to be wealthy, but I'd like to do it out of an industry that I've been part of. I'd like to see this community grow in something that we came from. You know, you've heard during the debate about access to the waterfront and how people are upset because we can no longer walk the waterfront. Well, what about those that like to go out on the weekends and troll around down there in Tucks Inlet? I do. It's great spring salmon fishing down there in the winter. You get lots of crabs. But now you're restricting access to those areas for recreational use. So you're expanding. What you're doing is you're closing in your citizens. You're putting up a wall. And that's going to need an awful lot of opposition. You know, I could go on, but I think you guys have to seriously take a look. Step back. Don't go on anybody's agenda but yours and the agenda of the citizens and what they want. There's a lot of concern. I know we have to keep it to 444, but there's also a lot of concern, and you've heard them, about Laylo Island and about Digby and others. This is the last untapped area where they haven't destroyed in natural resource extractions or use it as or using us to pimp out the dirty pollution that we want to send to China to line their pockets and their bank accounts. I'm not willing to be pimped out. And I don't think you guys are either. As I say, you know, we got a lot of things here going on the plate here. And the Gitxsan and the Wet'suwet'en nations have clearly stated no. Nothing's coming through our territories. And I think you have to respect and understand and find out why and start supporting those types of things instead of being part of the railroad that wants to go right over top of them and forget about their constitutional rights on unceded territories. A lot of the areas here are unceded territories where they want to run things. They might have got some agreements, but those agreements might be in jeopardy with all of the questions that are coming out on the legality of how they were signed. And by whose right that they had to sign those. Because of the houses and the chiefs and the areas that the hereditary chiefs control. It's not an easy question, but it's an important question. And it's the fundamental question that's being ignored by the provincial and federal governments, even though with the Chilkoot decision being put in place when they say no and they improve habitation, they have the right to say no. It's being denied. That's their constitutional right. And our constitutional rights as people to speak up are being extinguished. Every chance Harper has, and we've seen it after the JRP hearings here and how they're being orchestrated now. You've got to apply, you've got to fill out a form that's so complicated and long that most people can't do it without a lawyer. Let's not get into that ballgame. Let's keep it open and so that you can hear it. Might be our only chance to say no. And that's why I'm saying it very loud and clear. No to this. No to the LNG here in the north. I make my living from the ocean, and I hope that future generations behind me and my family can make that same living. I know lots of you up here have worked in the plants and have family members that work in the plants. And that's an important thing to remember. I've heard the promise of jobs and all of these that are going to give the youth future and hope. But it's during construction. And after that, the back is turned on. I heard that from Enbridge. All of the jobs, the apprentices that they're going to be promising all of the youth if they get the permission to build a pipeline. When I question them, how long is it going to take to do it? They say 2 years. I says, well, geez, a carpenter apprenticeship is 5 years, a millwright apprenticeship is 4 years. So where do they go after this? You're not promising them nothing except cheap labor, get what they want, and then throw them back out into the streets and back into a future that they never had. You know, that's what you have to start thinking about. They can promise all the jobs in the world they want, but the reality is, what kind of jobs? If they were actually totally serious about it, it wouldn't be such this last public meeting here on the 25th that I came to. A few placards up on the wall, read at it, pick up a report, and that was it. And there's so many questions that have to be answered. We're not getting any proper answers. We're getting a quick 5-minute display here and asking me to decide the future of my city, the future of the north, the future of the people where the gas is going to come up, where they're going to frack the living bejesus out of it. You know, look at the pollution in the water and everything else that's taken into account. Maybe this might be a good way for you to learn about a little bit of where a lot of the First Nations that are opposing pipelines and stuff come through. Go on YouTube, Google the first law, and listen to what it's about. That's the law about protecting Mother Earth and keeping her alive. Because all we're doing is poisoning her. And we've seen it from one end of the world to the other. And it's all because of greed of oil and gas. A few more years, the fighting ain't going to be over oil and gas, it's going to be over water. Who's got the last little bit that's left unpolluted because of what we're doing right now. And that's a pretty scary situation, but I think it's an honest situation that we will eventually see. Let's not be part of let's not allow our community to be pimped out for the cheapest buck that they can get as they line their pockets. We'll stand out and look at ways of developing this country, or this city, in a manner that's respectful to the people, the First Nations up and down the line, and those that are depending on us tonight to make that educated statement of voting no, and let them know that we stand with them and we're not going to allow citizens in other communities to be poisoned or to be kicked off their land because of eminent domain because I want to run a pipeline through it so I can line my pocket. I don't care if your family's been there for 100 years, it's too bad. That's what you have to start thinking about. It's not just Rupert, but the other communities and the people that are being affected. And I wish you luck in your debates on this issue. And I strongly suggest, and I strongly ask you that you vote no on this. And let's get down to some really economic development that benefits the people, not the corporations and the greed. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is John Farrell.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John Farrell. I live on 132 4th Avenue East. I'm here tonight as the president of the Prince Rupert Chamber of Commerce. And first of all, I'd like to extend my congratulations to the new Mayor and Council. And I speak on behalf of my board when I say we look forward to working closely with you in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. On to business at hand. Speaking for my membership, we fully support the application in front of us for rezoning of lot 444. We understand that that means that we'll be expecting a LNG facility, which we look forward to in terms of prosperity for our next great port city. I also want to applaud Council for the move to hire Barb Fagetter to provide us with an analysis on the water we drink and the air we breathe. I know tonight that's not what we're here to do or talk about, but it's a great start for the conversation, in which the Chamber will be part of once the regulators, once that whole process of the environmental assessment starts. So tonight we just want to share our support for the topic at hand, which is the rezoning application, and we look forward to your decision. Thank you very much.
Next we have Sean Petrie. That's how you pronounce it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Sean Petrie, 1058 Ambrose Avenue is my address. Keep this quick because I think I'm last. My question is development good or bad? There's a place right near here where the water is toxic. It's hostile to life growing. Interestingly, these thousands of liters of water are just a few hundred meters from a salmon stream. The area has been clear cut, and all wildlife has been kicked out of their natural environment. And we all love this place and pay dearly for it. It's called a swimming pool. Is development good or bad? I think we need to look at this development and others like it from a more philosophical perspective. What is our standard of value? Is it all about maintaining a pristine natural environment untouched by humans? Then perhaps all of us, including First Nations, should simply pack up and leave. That would be a reasonable biocentric approach. But if our standard of value is human progress and development and comfort and vibrancy, we must find ways to build and invest and innovate and grow and change. That's a human-centric philosophy. I, for one, welcome this development for those reasons, provided there are reasonable protection for the environment and the people who live here. I'd just like to remind everybody that the people that live here are not the people that descend from people that used to work for Charles Hayes, maybe drank from him at the time. There's an awful lot of people that have moved to Prince Rupert in the last 5 years, me being one of them. And if we were to tell ask those people, why did they move here? It's because they see a grand future. That future involves development and progress and work and expansion and creativity and innovation and education and healthcare. All those things take technology and money, and tax revenue. It is very simple to say no, 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 no. What we need to do is find a way to say yes. And I believe that there's enough people here that are smart enough to make that happen. We've got to find a way to say yes. Maybe the proposal isn't perfect the way it's proposed right now, but what you need to do is find a way to say yes. No, we don't like this, but yes, we can do this because this is better. That's called innovation. And I just want to stop there because I'll go on far too long, and I know people have been sitting for a long time. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
So there's nobody else registered on the speaker list. Oh, my apologies, Councilor. Actually, we have one more. Councilor.
This is weird, and apparently it's the way things need to be done, because once the public meeting is over, then you can't have new information for council to decide. So the public the new information has to come in the public hearing part. So what I did is I went out today, because it was raining. I went out today because it wasn't raining, and I took some pictures. And what my concerns were is where the boundary on the Tuck Inlet side will be, the lower boundary of the Tuck Inlet side. So this picture is taken from Arrow Point, which is on the airplane base side of Black Lawrence Ferry. And so you can see the Coast Guard base at the building at the right, and that's looking across at the bottom end of lot 444 that I believe is going to be P1. And so the next one. That just close up, you can see it's fairly flat, and that piece of property there, the water edge is considered to be good habitat for fish, particularly for juvenile salmon. And that, so I took these pictures so you can see that, because everybody who's been down to that area will always see that navigational marker in the passage. And so that's just for, again, us looking at the part that will be part of the park area or lot for P1. And that's just a bigger picture. Next. So then we start getting to the part that is not going to be part of P1. And this is taken off of the end of Canadian Fish Dock. So at Seal Cove, end of Canadian Fish Seal Cove Dock. And that part will be, it doesn't look on Exxon's pictures as though that's going to be used, but it will be, the way the boundaries are set now, part of the LNG industrial zone. That's a closer part of, I think that'd probably be about the border of the LNG industrial zoning. The part to the right of the marker is going to be public, and the other side mountain. That's again taken from, I believe that's taken from Seal Cove. Next one is the Canadian Fish Seal Cove. This is definitely looking from Canadian Fish Seal Cove, and it's looking down the harbor. You see the log booms and other things going on, and there's a little dip in there, and that is all of this habitat is considered to be cobble and cobble beach, and good for juvenile salmon, which do use this part of Tuck Inlet. And so that one is again from Seal Cove. It's just looking down Tuck Inlet, but you can see can see where the boats were, where we looked at, where that last picture was a close-up of the head, straight in the middle of the picture. And really it was around that corner that I'm concerned that if, particularly if Exxon doesn't need it, that it should not be zoned industrial, it should be zoned public. That's where the cobble beaches and sandy beaches are, all around that side too. And there's a particular little bay up there where as you can see where the cliffs start, then that becomes habitat that isn't so great for juvenile salmon. So next one. So again, that's a picture from the end of Canadian fish, showing the same thing, just a bit closer. Next. And that's a picture that's on Silk Cove Circle. That's looking, those are the, I don't know what they're called now, but the Evergreen Apartments. It's looking over the top of the Evergreen Apartments, and it's really that low area, that little peninsula that you want to call it, all around that is where all around both sides would be industrial. So, and all around both sides of that little peninsula thing is surrounded by good cobble rearing area for juvenile salmon. Next one. That's just over the top of the apartment building and just a close up. And I think you can see where the cliff starts. When the cliff starts, that is really not that is not, according to Dr. Fagler's report, that's not really good juvenile habitat we need to be concerned about. The next one, that's just a view from Parmenter at the top of the hill. And it's really, I'm just trying to get a picture. I think that's it. So that's my information on where regarding where the should be between the P1. So that's my information.
Thank you. Okay.
Good evening to the new council. You newly elected people have a very difficult job ahead of you right off the shoot. But one of the things we have to...
Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry. Can you state your name and your address?
I beg your pardon. My name is Lloyd Claus. I live at 1227 11th Avenue East. I've been a resident in the city for 63 years, and I've seen Rupert through boom and bust many times. One of the things that I want to reiterate, this city was built on one man's dream, Charles Hayes, and he perceived and strove to get this city on its feet. He didn't work on the premise of the sky is falling in on us. We have to change our way of thinking. I am neither on board or off board with the rezoning. I'm sitting on the middle of the fence, trying to make a decision rationally. And on one side I look at all the years that I went through living in this city and seeing different industries come in, thrive, fail, somebody else moves on, and somebody else comes in and tries to make a business. This town used to be the best town in Canada in the mid-60s to work in. I can remember as a teenager, before I graduated from high school, you were 16 years old and walking down the street in the summertime. You got 6 or 7 offers. What are you doing? You want to go to work. You want to go fishing. What happened to that? We are now faced with a choice of making a decision to get either our city back on track or step back and let it fall by the wayside and do nothing. It's council's decision to, based on the facts from the public hearing here, to make a decision on lot 4. I am still undecided. But one of the things I have to remember is, over the 60 years I've lived in Rupert, governments, both on the federal, provincial, and municipal sides, have put in regulatory acts for the environment, which have to be followed. And I put my trust in what the government, right or wrong, whether I support them or not, those environmental issues have to be followed when a project of this magnitude comes together. So I'm sort of leaning that the big boy is going to look after us environmentally wise, but who's going to look after us financially? The problem that I can see facing the city council right now, and one of the things that Barb Fageter had brought up was that we immediately would need a new water line from Woodworth Lake. Who's going to pay for that? The taxpayer? Or is that money going to come from $18 million lease given to us by the LNG company? Is that going to gobble up a great portion of it? You have to ask these questions. Or is the LNG company willing to fund part of that new water line? In any case, we need that new water line. Because if something happens to the water line from Woodworth Lake to Rupert right now, then we're reliant on Shawotlands Lake, our water supply. So we're backed into a corner, and we have to rationally decide what our best option is. I want to keep it short, but I want to just part with this saying, an old Confucius saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. But remember, a bird in the hand can be messy.
Good evening, Your Honor, and council members. I'm very encouraged with this last election and the challenges that face you. My name is Dave Sterling, and I live at 1525 Overlook. Tonight I'm coming to speak on behalf of the ministerial. We too are very passionate about our community and the things that can take place. I think I'd like to speak to 4 or 5 issues. The first that I'd like to speak to is that you have an opportunity to provide a new vision for Prince Rupert, or an extended vision for Prince Rupert. Many speakers prior to me this evening had spoke about Charles Hayes and his vision, and we're in a new era. Maybe not a different vision, but a vision that is contemporary and one that is current. And so with that, with the speakers who have been here this evening, have spoken very passionately, and I too speak passionately, encourage you to garner that passion. I encourage you to be very courageous as you address the difficult issues before you. I think as a ministerial, we are encouraging you to go forward with this rezoning. I think that it's going to provide a huge benefit to Prince Rupert. As we've listened this evening to those speakers, do we have all the answers? No, I think that what we would like to encourage you to do is in partnership, in collaboration, and in collegial negotiation, help find those answers. I think that we have some very talented people in our community who can be of significant help in this process. And so I encourage you this evening as you come and make the decision for rezoning. I appreciated Bob Long's comment as he talked about the social issues. He mentioned issues around waste and light. I'd like to encourage council to expand their view of what the social issues are beyond waste and light. I think that housing are major issues in the community. I think that the social enterprise that we engage in on a day-by-day basis is an important piece. And so as I come to your report, I'd like to congratulate those who were part of preparing the report. One of the things that I appreciated were the references at the back. I encourage you to continue to do that, because as you provide the references, we can go to the data ourselves and we can make our own decisions. And I think that we can be then better partners with you in that vein. You mentioned that there's $18 million that is going to be provided to the community. What I would like to encourage you to do, if you could come up with a budget on how that $18 million is going to be spent. I think that that would allay some of the questions and maybe some of the anxiety that is present this evening as we listen to those who have presented. I would like to encourage you to address the human capital side in a significant way. As I listened to Exxon, Imperial present their processes this evening, there was nothing there that addressed the human capital. There was nothing there, although inference, to what the partnership with the Aboriginal people would be. I would like to encourage you, I know you can't change this document now, but down the road to include then the human capital side and to then include the Aboriginal side. So what would this report look like? It would have the extraction of the natural resource, which is described. It would have the environmental factors, which Barb has identified. She has given 7 recommendations. She mentioned in her presentation that she was limited to air quality and water quality. There are other factors that could be included. Typically, in a scientific report, you would identify the broad spectrum of what the issues are, and if you're only going to speak to 2 of them, air quality and water quality, that's fine. But let's have all of the issues described that are, in fact, important. I would like to encourage you as a council. I believe that there are money well beyond the proponent. You know, we're talking here about $18 million that is going to come to the city because of the rezoning. I believe that there are dollars available from the provincial government, the federal government, and other proponents, and that the city, through its processes, find ways to access those dollars to help. And one of the pieces, and maybe this is one of the pieces I want to make clear tonight, is that as we look at the recommendations, we're talking about air quality, that's one factor. We're talking about water quality, that's another factor. These are things that can be monitored. And so why not then put in place what you're going to monitor and how you're going to monitor it? In the presentations this evening, the impression is that it's going to be given to a third party. I would encourage council not to give it to a third party, but to in fact take ownership and monitor itself, because I think those are the things that are going to provide the assurance and the success that we're looking for in terms of quality of life here in Prince Rupert. Now, The last piece that I want to speak to is that the quality of life document that the city has prepared. I very much appreciated the work that Zeno and your staff have done at City Hall. I think that it needs to go one more step. The quality of life, there's a piece missing in that quality of life, and that's the recreational land use here in Prince Rupert. Could I encourage you as a council then to put that item into your next report? Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate the time, and I encourage you with all the challenges that you have.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Brain, City Councilors. My name is Rob Eady. I've lived here all my life. I'm a business owner and a member and director of the Chamber of Commerce. And I just wanted to come forward.
Sorry to interrupt, Rob. You state your address for administrator, please.
Yes, my address is 1859 Sloan.
Sorry, continue.
And I just wanted to congratulate the opportunity to help our city finances. I was here when our city council continued to spend $6 million a year that we never received from Parliament. And here's an opportunity that's my understanding from reading the paper and from talking to some of the councilors that we have the opportunity, our city has an opportunity for $18 million, and I wholeheartedly encourage you to sign and move forward. So I just want to reiterate, congratulations, well done.
Thank you. Come forward, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Tom Chang, 1541 Overlook. I think based on what I've read and what I've heard tonight, the issue at hand is the rezoning process. For that, I think I'm conditionally support the rezoning process. Whether at the end of the day is an LNG project or other projects, I think that has to be left with other regulatory. They have to earn their right to be there. I think tonight, we try to decide is to rezone a piece of property. It's no different than any property elsewhere in the city. So for that, I fully support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other? Come forward, please.
Kate Toy, T-O-Y-E, 1516 Casement Boulevard. I'd like to acknowledge and express gratitude for being on Tsimshian territory this evening and for working and playing and living on Tsimshian territory. I represent only myself this evening. This will be very short and quick. This is a quality of life. The document, I've read it a couple times. I understand there's a loud noise component to terminals such as this. The turbines are 747 compatible with the noise level of a 747 engine. I live on the as far away from the container port as you possibly can, and I hear the container port when I'm out in the evening. I will live very close to this LNG plant if it goes in. Another last the November 25th meeting, I was able to speak with Mr. Long, who was very kind in sharing his time and information. And he did state, which I had not known prior to this, that the Laylu Island would come in at a deficit, costing our community large amounts of money. I understand that this is on municipal land, and that is what the discussion is about, and creating tax dollars. However, I know Rich Coleman has stated and give warning to our municipalities to not tax these such developments on municipal property at rates that have been expressed tonight of $66 million. And I also know what else came up tonight was the vast amount of accumulated wealth of Exxon and lawyers that they could tap into, and what that would look like for us going into trying to get these said tax dollars if this was to go forward. That's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Tara Dias, D-I-A-S. I live at 1816 Rushbrook Avenue, which is very close to where the proposed LNG terminal will be. I am opposed to this for several reasons. We moved here for, we moved here for the air quality and the immense natural beauty. I will be affected by this because of the light, the noise, and all the environmental components, including my kid who has asthma. And I can't count on the provincial or the federal government, but I am counting on you. So please take your time in deliberating this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure that I was going to speak tonight, but I think, that was a really important point to consider. My name is Rhonda Stoy, and I live at 1154 Hayes Cove. We recently moved here, and so, I'm a new resident, and I know there was another person who just spoke that was a new resident saying that he moved up here because of opportunity. Well, I moved up here because I didn't want to live in a city anymore that was full of pollution and poor air quality. And, this is why we moved up here. And with an issue, with possibilities like this, I don't know if I want to stay in a city like this. What draws people up here is the clean air, is the water. And I don't think we realize, or a lot of people, I think many people do realize how important that is up here. In the summertime, people come up here to go fishing. I'm originally from Alberta. I know what's happening to my province. I moved to BC because I thought, things are a little bit better over here. And right now, I don't know. I don't know where to go anymore at this point. And when I see the same sort of development happening over here, and without really thinking about the long-term effects. Mr. Mayor, I remember you talking before you were elected that you wanted to get people involved here to talk about other possibilities for economic change, that we could really engage in that. And I want to see that happen. I want some ideas, and I think there are a lot of intelligent business people here and other individuals in the community that can come up with something better, something long-term, not so short-sighted. And we talk about air quality, the irony of this report. I mean, we're talking about serious pollution here and things that could affect our water. I was horrified that this was even being considered. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. Maybe they aren't here tonight, but I know I know a lot of people who are concerned with this. And I just really hope you think long and hard about the real long-term effects here. We're not talking 20 years. And I'd like to start a family soon, but if this is what it's going to be like here, I don't know if I want to do that here. So.
Thank you. Are there other people that would like to come forward? Please come forward.
My name is Des Nobles, N-O-B-E-L-S. I live in Dodge Cove, Lot 11. And I hadn't expected to speak to you this evening. As a matter of fact, I tried to stay out of this. But as the way the evening is going, I think it's incumbent upon me to provide you with some further information that I think the Council should take into consideration. I would suggest that Council look very closely at the experience in Western Australia in terms of what they've dealt with, both in terms of what they've spent and what they have made with the LNG that's coming to that region. Talk to some of the communities that have dealt with the issues that they're holding there and dealing with right now. I don't envy you the job that you have before you, and I think you all know well enough what my position is, so I don't really need to state that. But I would suggest to you, please be careful what you wish for.
Thank you. Are there other people that would like to come forward?
I'm gonna say now, I wish you to make notes, write it down. That's the way I say it. Two things. There's a publication available at the Prince Rupert Library. I can go online to, and what I ask you to do is you Google Watershed Sentinel. When you get the home page for that, in the top right-hand corner, there is a search box. In there, you type in LNG, the two dots, and space, and reality check. And the resultant page you get up, you have an opportunity to pick up on the report. The report is put forward. I don't know if there's somebody here earlier made mention to it, but this fellow is a 3-decade-long Geological Survey of Canada employee. He put the report together. I'm wondering whether or not he's retired or not because of what's going on with the muffling of our scientists in Canada in regards to any issues on development. But in any case, once you read through, you will get a really clear understanding of what is actually going on and what the proposals are for the future as to where the gas is coming from. The gas is not out of the ground yet. For the simple reason they're all waiting for what's going to happen here. Once the go-ahead has gone forward here, then a dramatic increase of fracking will happen. The second one I want you to search up on is National Geographic. And you go to March of 2013. The title page of the magazine is you're looking through a flaring flame. The background with mining of natural gas, oil extraction. It is up to the date of the publishing of that magazine is a concise eye opener of what this is. Pardon me. The article is about North Dakota. There's a major basin underground there that is providing oil and gas. It just so happens the train wreck at Lac Megantic, the material that was in the train comes from there. The report itself, or the article itself, it gives you clear insights, pictorially and written, what's going on there and what has been going on there. And you can't help but be astonished, amazed, and then frightened because of the sheer, it's like having a ship that's going in a direction. There's problems on it, but nobody seems to know how to navigate it, stop it, or it's just going. And this is what the development is like. It is a blind. It's like everybody's running around with something covering their eyes, and they're not seeing the realities of how things are being, how people are being affected by this development. It's a rapid development. It's like it's driven. There's no stopping to it. The governments in the states there are pushing this. I've seen this same sort of thing in Cook Inlet, where the rights of the environment are taken away from the state of Alaska. In other words, they're superseded, where the drilling effluent that comes out of the holes is being allowed to be dumped in Cook's Inlet with so-called understanding that, supposed understanding that there's enough circulation in Cook's Inlet to flush everything out. But subsequently, First Nations there have been able to document through assays on their food, everything's contaminated. So there's no recourse anymore for them. And this continues to stay as a viable option for the future. That this extraction continues at the same way, same pace, without any real thought to what's going on there. So these two reports, I strongly suggest you find them online and really sit down and chew them through and digest them properly, and not just say, well, this is bull. It is real. Thank you, Lothar.
So I'm going to call three.
I thought Des would bring this up, but the word out for today, we can't confirm it, is Petronas is pulled out of Lelu for 3 to 5 years. So I would think that anything that you do here, you should make it with the idea that you can't subsequently give them a 3 or 5 year delay. So if anything, what your decision is, make it happen, or if it's going to be delayed, then it's to open up again. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to call 3 times. I'll call once. If there's another person who'd like to come to the mic to express their concerns, you're welcome to do so at this time. I'll call for a second time. The person who would like to express their concerns, please come to the mic at this time. And I will call for a third time and final time that if the person is concerned about the zoning development, please come to the mic and express your concerns. Okay. We are going to have a 10-minute recess, and we will come back to a special council meeting where the council will debate the bylaw. I would like to, for everyone to know that after we adjourn this public hearing, council cannot speak to the public regarding this matter. We cannot talk to you for the next 10 minutes, essentially. So please respect that right, and that we can't collect any new information after this. And I will now call the public hearing to a close. Okay, I'd like to call tonight's special council meeting to order. First item of business is a recommendation that the agenda for the special council meeting of December 3rd, 2014 be adopted as circulated. Yes, Councilor Ferguson.
I would just want. Okay, I was wondering, we have a report from staff. This is the report that was done by Mr. Long, and it makes recommendations on that he read to us. And basically, in many of them, it takes recommendations from Dr. Fagetter's report, and it's the report that is on, I think it's the 26th, and it's on our package. It is November 25th. It's from Robert Long, and it's a zoning appeal 444, and he referred to it when he was talking to us in his report. And it makes it parallels recommendations, many of the recommendations that Dr. Fagetter had if we approve this. And so I was wondering if we do approve the zoning, if this should be added to after being in native C, so we can discuss the recommendations that come, because what this report says, it says the staff recommend that we approve the bylaw, two bylaws, and subsequent to the zoning decision, subsequent to the zoning decision, if we vote in affirmative. The owner of lot 444, which is the legacy corporation, shall require any LNG proponent intending to lease or otherwise utilize the zoned land for eligible industrial purposes to give the following undertakings, and it lists the undertakings that are environmental and also social. And so I was just wondering if we want to add this. I would like to add this as C if we do pass the zoning.
Could you get a motion?
Yeah, I would like to move that we consider the recommendations in Mr. Long's report as C if the zoning recommendations pass.
Any seconders? Councilor Cunningham? Any discussion? Discussion? I'll call question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next item of business. A recommendation, having had first reading on July 7th, 2014, and second reading on November 3rd, 2014, and a public hearing on December 3rd, 2014, that council give third reading and adopt the City of Prince Rupert Quality of Life Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 3350, 2014. Moved by Councilor Cunningham, seconded by Councilor Brunhauer. Discussion. Well, I'll start off by saying a few words. So we weighed the pros and cons tonight. Couple notes here. So by zoning this lot, we received $18 million, and that's simply zoning the lot industrial. And this industrial zoning has a special caveat of LNG only. There's also another portion for public use. The current state of where the city of Prince Rupert is, it's a really difficult decision to make because there are challenges to the LNG industry. But people need to understand also that with where we are with our infrastructure deficit, our water lines, we're about $100 million behind at the moment. It's really hard to not say this is something that we might want to pursue. The money that comes in, if we all approve, I think it's something that we're definitely going to be starting to address the infrastructure needs of this community. There's one thing that we don't have now is any money from our previous generations for the needs of this community now. And it's something that, as current mayor, I definitely want to ensure that the future generations that are going to inherit this town aren't going to be left with a bill such that this council has been left with. That being said, I'm also very interested in this new economy concept of the renewable energy and local food and all those types of things, the things that a lot of people here tonight mentioned that they'd like to see. And those things take money as well to create. Wind turbines, tidal generation, those things need financial backing to create. I do also have a vision of seeing this town go in a sustainable direction. At the moment, even if I really, really wanted to, we wouldn't have the financial means to do it. And so some of the things I hear tonight and the concerns, I absolutely 100% hear all of the concerns that have been said. They're absolutely legitimate concerns. But at the current moment where the process is we are going to explore what this will look like over the next 3 years. And the city of Prince Rupert will gain a new financial base just by exploring what economic development means in Prince Rupert, regardless if it's approved or not approved. And so those are some of the things I want people to consider at the moment while we are making this decision tonight. that at the moment, although this is a risk, I believe it's time for Prince Rupert to start taking risks and to start to get our house in order financially, so that even if we want to go in a sustainable direction, we have a financial means to go to it. And I'd like to open that up to Councillor Cunningham now.
One of the things I heard tonight that I kind of like the idea is taking ownership or being a partner in the monitoring process. I'm quite sure the proponent would like us to work with them on that, just to make sure it's a fair and equitable process. A lot of people have concerns about air and things like that and the water. If we monitor these properly, I think we can address that concern. I know a lot of people in the last year I've been on council have complained about our taxes, how high they are. I don't know if we start turning our back on some of these projects and that. I don't know if people are prepared to go for double-digit tax increases. These are the things that we have to wrestle with as a council. You know, everything's going up, and if we don't get more influx of people into this community to pay more taxes, and during the campaign, everyone talked about an industrial tax base. We need this industrial tax base. And as much as I'm concerned about some of the things, I think we've got to take a chance and we've got to take a step forward. It's the start of a journey that this town can take, and hopefully we can do it in partnership with everyone involved in the community. We've got to take everyone's concerns seriously, but I really think it's the right step to take. Thank you.
I have many things to say about the zoning application, but this is the quality. This is the quality of life official community plan, and I want to say when we wrote the official community plan, the city owned that piece of property that we're talking about, that lot 444. We owned it, but because it wasn't within city boundaries, it wasn't part of the official community plan. Inasmuch as official community plan really only was talking about the lands under the city's control, and of course we did talk about things in the official community plan, such as liking good water quality, good air quality. Those were all things that were part of our official community plan. And I think that that this amendment to the official community plan, which talks about the new lot 4444, which is now included in our city boundaries, and we included it in the city boundaries because we want to protect some of it and we want to develop some of it. And I think that I'm certainly in favor of expanding that area for two uses. One is for public enjoyment. We need to talk, I think, about expanding our waterfront plans. I think we need to talk about how we're going to access that waterfront on the other side. Do we want to have lots of access? Do we want to, or do we want to have restricted access to that enjoyment by not providing cars or a bridge base over there? Really, the question is, if we're going to, if the Exxon plant is there, are we going to be able to open up Untitled waterfronts? And I think that we can open up that waterfront on the other side of Exxon or any other company, LNG company builds. I think we'll be able to open up that for future public use. So I think there's some worrisome things, which are the liquid natural gas. I'll get into all the things I heard and why I'm going to come to the conclusion that I think I'm going to come to when we talk about zoning. But I think that this is the quality of life community plan bylaw, and I think I'm speaking in favor of the amendment to that bylaw.
Thank you. Councilor Nish.
When I first started thinking about this project, I didn't know what to think. I started to educate myself about it, I started to think about the mill and what the mill did for this community for 50 years, and it provided 700-800 jobs. It provided a good living for a lot of people, and I asked most people in this community, if that mill was still running today, would you be trying to shut it down? The answer to that would probably no. We understand that there is challenges with industry, but without industry, we can't survive. People talk about wanting to leave town if things like this go ahead, but we may all have to leave town if it doesn't go ahead, because we will have no water to drink, we will have no sewer lines to use, we will have no roads to drive on. So I've looked at it from many angles, and I've had a few sleepless nights thinking about this. I've talked to people in the, say, tugboat industry, I've read the reports, and I really think that I am in support of this. I just can't see this town surviving without going ahead. But I also think that we have to rely on the government in the environmental process to make sure that it's done in a proper way, because we obviously don't want a disaster in our hands. But I do think that this is something that we have to move forward in our community for us to stay here. If someone chooses to leave because they feel their air is not good, I don't want to leave at all. But in order to stay, I think we have to have something. And I really, as Barry said, I can't afford to have double-digit tax increases anymore. This town is strapped for cash, and we need help. That's all I got to say.
Councilor Brett Howard?
Yeah. I ran my city election on my, I said, like, I want, can't hear you, lower my taxes and welcome new industry. And I do care about the environment, fishing industry, my kids working in the cannery, but on the same time, as a councillor, it's my job to keep my kids in town here, to fix up infrastructure, to bring new jobs. So that's why I'm in the favor of this law to rejoin. Thank you.
Councilor Moreau?
The first thing I want to say is it was mentioned a few times that as a very new council, this is a tough decision. This is probably going to be one of the biggest decisions that we make in our first 4 years. And to do it in our first essentially 4 days in office is really profound. We understand the gravity of the situation. We're not taking this lightly. And this process where we're able to hear all of these concerns and make an informed decision is absolutely crucial to the democratic process. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of it. I want to get very specific for a second and then philosophical, just to end off here. People are right when they say there are a lot of unanswered questions with this project, and I agree. But one thing I want to stress is we're not selling the land with this decision. What we're doing is we're entering into an investigation agreement to essentially explore what the opportunities are on this particular piece of land. And that's the first thing I want to say that's very specific, is that we are not going out and selling our land to outside interests. The second thing I want to say is just in this more philosophical discussion that was had tonight about just change, development more broadly. It's going to be very easy for us and very easy for councils in the past to say no to anything. It's easy to say no because change it's uncertainty. Saying no, we know exactly what we're going to get. It's going to be the same thing that we've always experienced for the last 50 years. The hard decision for us is saying yes. That's why I'm disagreeing with some people that got up and spoke tonight to say it's easy for us to just grab at the cash, and it may look like that from the outside, but from our seat here tonight, the hard decision is to say yes, that we are going to be open for business. For myself, I ran my entire campaign on a change of attitude at the council level. Councillor Randall did the same, Councillor Rich did the same, Councillor Cunningham did the same, and Mr. Brain did the same thing. The results of that election have given us a mandate to do exactly what we said we were going to do, and that's going to be to change the attitude from the top.
I'll say on the last point here is that ultimately this is about diversifying our economy. We made there's a decision today made by Petronas, there was a decision made by BG. The truth is that a lot of this might not happen. But saying no to options, I don't believe is a luxury we can afford. And looking at our options is something I think will bring fiscal responsibility back into our coffers. And everyone has made some good points tonight. When it comes to moving forward, trust me that we will be very diligent with the environmental aspect of it and the social aspect. I think this council is really coming on the same page around what the issues are, what our priorities are. The city staff has made very clear indications of where we're at with infrastructure, with housing. They've done a lot of work. We're in a really good position, and now it's time to really execute the plan, which takes financial backing. And if we can secure some sort of financial base here, some sort of industrial financial base, from that stage we can then explore the next level, the new economy, these innovative ideas, the things that people are really crying for right now in the world, because we know the world is dominated by the fossil fuel economy. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, these are things that are here now, they're opportunities now, and I think all of us of council understand that we need to capitalize on those opportunities. And in that note, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to call a question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Next item of business is a recommendation having had first reading on July 7th, 2014, and second reading on November 3rd, 2014, and a public hearing on December 3rd, 2014. That council give third reading and adopt the City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3351, 2014.
Your worship, I have a technical question.
Go ahead, Councilor Fulkerson.
Sorry, I'm supposed to be calling Mr. Mayor. It's too many years, too much habit. I'll try to change. Mr. Mayor, what I was wondering on a technical question is, can we change, I've forgotten the answer to this, can we change, can we make an amendment on the third reading and adopt it here, or would that require another meeting?
Mr. Mandrick, could you refer that question to?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that would require another meeting.
Well, I'm going to move that we adopt City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3351. And you're all going to hate me, but I don't care. I'm going to move that, and I'm going to move an amendment to that we move the line that delineates the property to the bay, which abuts the cliff area, so that all of the cobbled area will be in P1, and the cliff area will not be will be in the new zone, the new LNG zone.
Any seconders? Motion falls to the floor. I'll move the current recommendation previously stated. Sorry, go ahead, Councilor.
Does this involve another meeting if we do this amendment? When would that meeting be held? Would you like to second it before I ask questions?
I'll second it, just so I can ask the question.
Second one by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion?
Okay. One more meeting, when's it gonna be?
This is going to be a little bit of a difficult process because all the technical details are already drawn up, supposedly. And I'll defer this to the manager.
It's a technical issue. What we've got here is having to start the process over again, which would require notice, another meeting, and that requires 2 advertisements in the paper, in addition to setting certain timelines for the next meeting, and we would have to try to figure out how we could meet all those conditions and what date it would be, but it will be a substantial length of time by the time we could actually do all that, because we have to give the public afford an opportunity to do that. What I can say technically, with respect to where the boundary is, the boundary has been proposed and it will have to be dealt with in this way at this time, or amended by council and then move on to another process. But I can tell you that discussions that I've had with the proponent with respect to where the ultimate piece of property is still subject to discussion with respect to where their proposal would actually be on the property. As you can see, the 2 proposals, one which is LNG by barge and the other one is LNG by land. And there is an agreement that any of the interest that the city has with respect to where the precise location of those proposals are is open for discussion, and the land which would we would then have a discussion about the land, whether or not or where that final piece of land hasn't been determined yet, won't be determined until after we've gone through the EA process. So I think to meet the need that I hear with respect to those particular beaches, I think it does. You can satisfy that need by just indicating that as one of the conditions under my report. Now, the property will still be zoned for that purpose, and so that would be the issue that would still be there. So hopefully that makes it clearer, not less clear.
Do you have anything to add, Councilor?
No, I just, I know that the proponent has been waiting anxiously, Mr. Mayor, to get this through. I also think that we need to do it right. And that is a piece of land that I think that I didn't want to bring up a whole bunch of visibility issues, but it's a piece of low-lying land that that my guess is you are going to hear lots of pinnacle pellet issues with. And if I so bluntly put that, then I think that we should be very careful about just the reason that I asked earlier, the reason the line is there, which I didn't know till tonight, is because there's because that's a power line. It's just because it's easier to draw a line where there's already a line. And so, to have what we want for public land to be separated just because there's a power line just seems to be a ridiculous thing for another 10 days of delay. And I wrote the motion, the positive, with that amendment, and that's why I did it, is because I have a whole bunch of reasons why I have made up my mind one way or the other, but I do think that it is a mistake to rush forward with this zoning and not have it right. And we do own Principal Legacy Corporation. I suppose what we could do is determine that we're not going to sell that portion of land and tell a proponent that and rezone it later. I mean, if that meets council's, if that's what council wants or wants to have a discussion about that later, I mean, that's what council's for. It's a democratic organization, but I'm just advising that people were worried about, people asked the council that I was on, why did we rush through Pinnacle Pellet? And I can tell you that wasn't a rush process, but we may have, we didn't participate in that EA, and we're going to obviously participate in this EA, but I am worried about that chunk of land. And, I suppose there are different ways to skin a cat, and if you want to skin a cat some other way, that's fine with me. But my concern is that we get this right the first time, and that's why I went down there and took the pictures. And Mr. Mayor, I was very disappointed that the public meeting that was held was not like this kind of public meeting, where we could have had a dialogue with people back and forth in a public meeting, to have a dialogue about this kind of thing, because the public had a bunch of questions, and because the setup is like that, nobody can answer those questions. Try to figure out, I can't answer the questions, I don't really answer the questions. I thought there were lots of good questions brought tonight that I would like to address. They're not going to particularly impact my views only, but I think they were important issues. So anyway, that's what I have to say, and that's the reason I made the motion, the amendment to the motion.
Is there any further discussion? Yes, please. You have more to say?
Nope.
Councilor Santori, you want to carry forward with your motion?
Yeah, I've made the motion. I'm not planning on withdrawing it.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. I'll bring the original recommendation back to the floor. Having had first reading on July 7th, 2014, and second reading on November 3rd, 2014, and a public hearing on December 3rd, 2014, that council give third reading and adopt the City of Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3351, 2014. Could I get a mover? Moved by Councilor Niche, seconded by Councilor Moreau. Discussion? Councilor Wilkerson.
Okay. Well, I think that there are a lot of issues brought up tonight on both sides, and I think that it is incumbent upon ourselves to have a look at them and weigh them. And first of all, people brought up larger issues: fracking, pipelines going through First Nations territories where they're not welcome, greenhouse gas emissions, and alternative energy patterns, and that Canada has no energy strategy. And I think those are all really important issues, and I think that, in fact, I'm opposed to fracking. I'm opposed to pipelines going through First Nations territories where they aren't welcome. I do think that Canada needs to have an energy strategy, and part of that energy strategy should be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those are all big ticket items, and they are political movements, in my opinion. They are not the responsibility of only Prince Rupert, for Prince Rupert to bear the burden of changing all of society. I think we need to be part of the change, but I don't think we need to bear responsibility for 100% of this change. Canada needs to have an energy strategy. I've argued that vociferously, but that is not, we are not going to make Canada have an energy strategy because we turn down an LNG plant here, or because somebody builds an LNG plant here. The issues regarding Prince Rupert economic development. Well, there are going to be some LNG plants built in this area. When LNG first came to town, there was going to be 3 plants, and then all of a sudden there was a gold rush, and I think Mr. Scheisha said there was a gold rush and a boom and bust thing. Well, we've seen the boom, which was 6 or 7 or 8 plants going to be on the north coast, and now they're seem to be falling by the wayside. I don't really care. One of those other plants locates here. The only plant that I want to locate here is the one up Tuck Inlet where we can tax it. I want a plant to locate on lot 444. I do not want a plant to locate on Lalou Island. And I am totally and utterly opposed, Mr. Mayor, to that operation, but that's not in it. We as the city council have absolutely no control of that estuary, which brings our town millions and millions of dollars every year, both in sports, tourism, and in commercial fishing. We have no control over that estuary. We have no control over that Petronas project. We have no control over Lalou Island or Smith Island, which apparently they want to put a gravel pit on. So we don't have control over that, but we do have control over our lot 4444. It's not in the estuary. It's probably a spot that makes sense of where to develop LNG. It's not by an airport. It's not somewhere out in, I mean, I wish the people of Black Lands all the best, but it's not somewhere out in Grassy Point, which we are going to probably bear a great deal of the infrastructure burden of supporting that with hospitals and schools, people that would prefer to live in our town and live in Black Lands, but not get a cent in taxes from it. The same as BG will pay very little taxes to the city of Prince Rupert, and the same as Petronas, no taxes. So I'm in favor, if we have to have an LNG plant, to have an LNG plant where they pay taxes to us. Regarding, I think, people were talking about, and I totally agree with Councillor Niche regarding the pulp mill. I remember, maybe that's a thing about being old, but I remember the angry meeting in the Civic Center where people from all up as far as Hazelton demanded that pulp mill workers gut their collective agreement so that it would run, it would be restarted. They didn't gut their collective agreement, and it wasn't restarted. And Prince Rupert said, oh, you don't have to pay taxes unless you restart. And that's what got us into the present mess. So, I think that we have to be careful about what we do with this LNG plant. But we did have a pulp mill. We did have air inversions. We did have polluted water. You couldn't eat a crab in the harbor because of dioxins, the accumulation. So regarding economic development in Prince Rupert, I believe that of the many different kinds of industry that we could attract to Prince Rupert, one LNG plant in our harbor is probably one of the least polluting. Dr. Fagger's report, compares us, talks about air quality and Alcan, and talks about air quality from pulp mills. And out of it, particularly, it is better air quality than they're going to get from likely from Petronas, because they're using better scrubbers and better turbines that are going to provide better air quality if they use the land-based one. So I think that there are issues that were raised today that have yet to be answered. People have concern about Prince Rupert Legacy Corporation. I think we need to deal with Prince Rupert Legacy Corporation, and I think we probably need to maybe have a write-up about who controls it. How does council control it? Council does control it, but how does council control it? Why are 3 staff members on it instead of a city council sitting on it as the directors? And I think the issue of taxes, people raised whether Exxon, by putting their facilities on barges, could get around from taxes, and could get around our taxes, or if they could get around taxes in general. And I think that that's probably a discussion that we might want to have. I personally think that taxes are pretty inevitable when you live in Prince Rupert, and everybody's going to pay their fair share. And if you're a LNG industry, your fair share is going to be larger than mine. I think that the questions about log ship unloading, that was a real issue. It's a real issue for longshoremen, for people who are already in this town. That's a real issue. Are we going to have log unloading? Is that going to be prevented, or are LNG going to be compatible with log unloading? That's a part of the mitigation process, where we need to ensure that we can find a place where those log boats can unload continue to unload, and so that we don't lose those jobs, because those are excellent paying jobs as well. And I think the use of water was raised, and both the cooling, for cooling, and where the source is going to come from, where it's going to be leased. Those kinds of things are going to be found in the environmental assessment, and I think that we don't have to answer those things in a public hearing in order to make our decision. I think those things can be answered in the environmental assessment. I think that there are other issues of concern, such as air quality studies, air quality monitoring, and things that were raised, such as noise and lights, can also, and that's why I added to the agenda the recommendation brought to us by Mr. Long that says that we need to do a number of things, and I concur with that, and I think that we can put them in our recommendations, because not only are we the zoner of that property, we are also the landlord of that property. So I think that, we have impacts of tax-paying LNG, because people say we have to be careful of the impacts on our town. Well, we have the impacts of the tax-paying LNG, or we have the same impacts from a non-tax-paying LNG. That's the way I look at it. There's tax-paying LNG plants and there's non-tax-paying LNG plants. Well, we might as well have the impacts from the tax-paying LNG plant. So, I think that there are issues that we're going to have to keep our eye on. I think that people brought up those issues. I think that they are significant. I think that we can look after those issues for the most part. I think that this particular LNG plant does not look like it's going to have emissions that are going to singularly pollute our economy. If there was pollution, it's going to be from a combination of all of the LNG plants, if they all actually came online. I think we have to be very careful of them. I think that airshed study needs to be done, and we need to have a air quality plan. So, for those reasons, even though you guys won't change that boundary yet, for those reasons, because I think that these are going to be good industrial jobs. They are not cheap, non-union jobs. They are going to be good industrial, likely unionized jobs. I think the long-term effects from this one plant are not going to impact our community negatively, as long as we are diligent about being part of that environmental assessment process.
And actually, Councillor Thornton, I would agree with a lot of what you just said, and I'm glad that you raised a lot of those, because you look at it from a macro view. And I'll just simply add that we wouldn't have the opportunity to have the conversation if we were not to zone this tonight. And the conversation would have stopped here tonight. And if there's no further discussion, I'd like to, oh, Councillor.
Okay. As for the boundary extension, we've heard a lot about Exxon, big companies, distrust and everything. Here's a chance for Exxon right now, after the fact, to sit down with us, look at the boundary and say yea or nay. And there's the first step in a good partnership and a relationship. And I've so far seen nothing that goes against what I think will be a good partnership and relationship with them. They moved the height of land boundary and a few other things. So far, they've reached out to us. And here's another way they can reach out to us and say, okay, let's move this boundary a little bit, and it makes everyone happy. And it gives the people of Prince Rupert a little bit more waterfront than we've been wanting for a while. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Like to call question?
Question.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next item of business. Mr. Vandry, could you please read back item C that was proposed?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just have to scroll down here. It was moved by Councillor Thorkelson and seconded by Councillor Cunningham that Council, Wrong one. Sorry, moved by Councillor Thorkelson and seconded by Councillor Cunningham to consider the recommendations in Mr. Long's report as part of the requirements of the proponent to be dealt with in conjunction with the rezoning of Lot 444 being successful, and it was carried.
Well, Your Worship, that was to add it to the agenda, and now it's on the agenda, and so this is the recommendation that's on page 20 of your agenda package. And I move the recommendation, which has 12 points, Your Worship, your 12 points, Mr. Mayor. We'll get that right sooner or later. It has 12 points, it has 8 and then an additional 4. And I would move it and I would add 2 points. One would be included in the first 8, and the point would be that that the 2 industrial nuisances, noise and light, sorry, let's start over again. That the LNG proponent will undertake to negotiate with the city, directly with the city, any noise and light issues. So I would add that as a recommendation. So that would be under those first 4, would be recommendation number 9. And then I would add a further recommendation that the city direct the for a short legacy corporation to pay for an environmental officer responsible to the city to ensure that these recommendations are followed, and pay for sufficient staff and resources to attend the EA process on behalf of the city. So that would be, those would be the 2 additions. So the amendment to the recommendation.
Any seconders?
I'll second that.
Second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? I'll briefly mention that what may be a better option would be to have staff prepare a report on the cost of your last recommendation, which was the environmental officer, and the staffing of the EA process, so that council could get a better sense of exactly how much money that would cost us to get into that situation. Not that I oppose the idea, that I don't think we should necessarily pass a motion to say we're going to do that, and get ourselves into a situation where that's going to cost us a number I can't say at the moment how much that would actually cost, and it could be a lot. So I'd like to just maybe recommend maybe that particular last one would be the option of getting a report to see what that would look like, and at a further time to adopt a motion to actually implement it.
Well, Your Worship, we could do that, but and I know that many times when we spend money, we ask for staff to come back with a report. But this report says we had a $1 million non-refundable deposit already paid to us, to Legacy Corp, and I think that I know that this new council, everybody ran on change, but I have to remind you that the old council set this process up. They set up the Legacy Corporation. They made these negotiations with Exxon, and they set through this whole process to today of what we are doing. And part of that process was a discussion with ourselves regarding ensuring that we would have an environmental officer sit throughout the throughout the LNG EA process and throughout the and to make sure that any recommendations or conditions that we set were followed by the proponent. So even though this new council is certainly following through on what the old council proposed, I'd like to say that part of what the old council proposed was a follow-up out of that $1 million in the Legacy Corporation. And that's why I'm speaking very strongly about this, because I don't think that, the old council had a plan. And we don't need to have that plan, and we can ask for a report from staff. There's $1 million that was put into Legacy, and why it was put into Legacy is so that we can look after this proposal properly, because we didn't have any money to hire an environmental officer. And so we can take it out, we can ask for a report, it takes a waste of staff's time.
I'll add to that then. Well, what would be the difference of us contracting out, say Dr. Barb Fager again to be a part of that, rather than having to hire an in-house environmental officer? It's not necessarily that I'm opposed to that, it's that at the moment you're asking council to make a decision based on, we have no idea what the numbers would be or the length of time that these people would be in operation, and we can be getting ourselves into a situation where we're actually quite blind to the information. And I understand that the old council proposed that, and I absolutely agree it's a great idea. But at this current juncture, I'm not comfortable making a financial decision that has a black question mark next to it. And I don't know if any of the other councillors would like to weigh in on this question at the moment. Councillor Nish.
I understand what you're saying totally, Councillor Thurkelson. But would you sign payments for a new vehicle without knowing what the payment was? I agree with what you're saying, but we need to have some numbers in front of us before we can just do it blindly. I understand the money's there, but I don't want to do anything blindly for the next 4 years at least.
Anybody else? Councillor Panina.
Okay, one thing that wasn't added to that statement that Joy made was that the old council said there was going to be transparency on this whole project the whole time. And the only way we're going to ensure transparency is to have somebody overseeing it from the city point of view. Now, I don't know how much of a dollar sign we want to put on that, but if we're going to go out to the community and take this new journey with a new approach, it should be totally transparent. And the only way it's going to be totally transparent to have somebody from our side overseeing the whole thing. Now, maybe we can put some sort of dollar sign on it, I don't know. But transparency is very important for this whole bloody thing right now, from day one to the end. And if it's not there, you're going to have a lot of feedback from people that were here tonight with a lot of concerns. So I think transparency is very important, and having Barb or somebody overseeing it, I think is very important too.
Councillor Cunningham, I absolutely agree with that. That is absolutely, I don't think that is what we're arguing about. I think we all would like somebody to be full-time looking at the situation. Absolutely. We did go through the environmental assessment process with the Pillar Plant. There was many issues with that process. We want to move forward with a good process. Absolutely, 100% agree. I just believe that this particular recommendation at this particular time should be an assessment of what it would look like. That I believe that this council would, at a future time, within the next month or so, would absolutely adopt when we all have a good understanding of what that plan would look like. And that's what I think. And it's not that we don't have $1 million to not do it, that type of stuff. And it's not trying to reflect that. It's that I'm personally not comfortable mandating that happens without us knowing what the long-term contract's going to look like, how long these people are going to be involved, what's the numbers to that. There's a whole thing. I'd just like to see it first before I say yes, is what I'm getting at. So all I'm recommending is that this motion is just to within the next month, get it sorted out financially for us so we can look at what it would cost, and then from there we would make a decision. Councillor Thorkelson.
Well, this isn't a this isn't specific resolution that says how much we're going to spend. And it just directs that the Legacy Corporation pay for environmental officer. But, and that it pay for sufficient staff and resources to monitor the process. It doesn't talk about whether it's contracted out, whatever it is. However, in order so that we don't have a fight in our very second council meeting, I will say that that final recommendation shall be, if the seconder, it's a friendly amendment, that the final recommendation should be that council ask staff to report on what it would cost for the city to for the rest of the motion. If that makes you more comfortable, then I'm willing certainly to do that if the seconder would change that as a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I'll go along with that, but I will also say that, this council sat here tonight and told the people to trust them. And now they're putting a price tag on that trust. And I really don't like that idea. I'll go along and second that, but at the same time, I think we talked about how much money this city's gonna make from this project and that, and you've gotta trust us and blah, blah, blah. And now we're saying, well, yeah, you've gotta trust us, but, we might not necessarily want to spend the money to make sure that trust is there. So yes, I'll recommend that we investigate it, but I'll be watching it carefully.
And I'll just add to this, because I think there's just a minute discrepancy in understanding with all of us at the moment, is that this has nothing to do with the fact that we don't want to fund somebody. It's that I want to know what it means when you say an environmental officer. What's the roles, rules, and responsibilities? Give me a job description. I want to know what the staff's going to be doing, and I want to know what the project timeline for the staff will be, and I want to know the numbers associated so that we can all look at it together. This isn't going to go anywhere, this project, if you so we should all just look at that, and I don't believe we're going to shy away from approving that. But at the moment, I don't even know what you mean by an environmental officer. And we could talk till 1 in the morning about what an environmental officer does. And we're not going to do that, I believe. And that's all I'm getting at. It has nothing to do with, I want the community to trust us, but trusting us also means not just saying we're going to get an environmental officer, but maybe we all have a different idea of what exactly that means. So I think it would be great if staff could come up with what that looks like and what the cost will be, not because we don't want to approve it because it's too much money, and then we can all say, from everybody's perspective, okay, now we know what exactly these people are going to be doing, how long they're going to be involved for. We've involved the proponents in that process too, so that they know exactly what we're going to be doing with that, and then we all make a decision. And I think that can happen in short order. And so I appreciate that you're willing to make those changes, and same with Councillor Cunningham. I want to assure you that this is not about dropping the conversation, as it is about ensuring that the conversation is at a high level, and that it's at a place of shared knowledge, and that it's a place of clarity. And I believe it's a rational approach, and that it's something that I really want to pursue. The points all made are absolutely something I completely agree with. I do not want to move forward on this project blindly, and so I just want to reiterate why I see it that way. And if there's, I'll open up more discussion.
I'll call the question.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight. Moved by Councillor Cunningham and seconded by Councillor Niche, and I will adjourn tonight's council meeting, special council meeting.